The distant wail of sirens echoed through the shattered remains of Sarah's living room as she stood frozen, staring at the destruction that had once been her sanctuary. Just 3 days earlier, she'd laughed off her father's warnings about the suspicious vehicle circling the neighborhood, dismissing his military-honed instincts as the paranoid ramblings of a man who'd seen too much combat. Now, as former Special Forces operator Mike Reynolds surveyed the tactical entry points the intruders had exploited with practiced precision, decades of battlefield awareness clicked into familiar focus. The robbery wasn't random. The methodical execution, the specific items taken, the calculated timing. This was reconnaissance for something far worse. Someone was sending a message, and they'd chosen the wrong family to threaten. What dark forces from Mike's classified past had finally tracked him down through his daughter? Subscribe to our channel if this story of protection, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family speaks to you. 3 days earlier, Mike Reynolds noticed the sedan on his second pass through Sarah's neighborhood. Dark blue, late model, tinted windows. Nothing inherently suspicious to civilian eyes, but it was parked exactly 23 minutes longer than practical for a delivery or social call. Then it circled the block. Twice. 22 years in Special Forces had hardwired pattern recognition into Mike's neurology. The vehicle maintained optimal sightlines to Sarah's front entrance. Driver remained inside, engine occasionally activating to maintain climate control. Classic surveillance posture. Mike's pulse remained steady as he pulled into Sarah's driveway for their weekly dinner. His weathered hands, still strong at 58, automatically cataloged the nearest improvised weapons. Garden trowel, decorative river rock, porch swing chain. Old habits from theaters of war where identifying weapons meant survival. "Dad, you're early again," Sarah said, opening the door before he knocked. At 32, she had her mother's eyes and his stubborn jawline. "I'm still prepping dinner." "Traffic was light," he replied, glancing casually over her shoulder to check sightlines and potential entry points. The living room windows needed better locks. The back entrance was obscured from neighbor visibility. The shrubs beneath the guest bedroom window would provide cover for approach. Sarah caught his scanning gaze and sighed. "Dad, stop casing my house like it's a military target." Mike forced his posture to relax, consciously lowering his shoulders and softening his eyes. The transition from operator to father never seemed to get easier, even years after leaving active service. "Sorry, sweetheart. Old habits." Sarah's kitchen smelled of garlic and rosemary. Mike positioned himself with his back to the wall, maintaining clear views of both entrance points while she chopped vegetables. Tactical positioning integrated so deeply into his behavior that he no longer recognized it as unusual. "How's work?" he asked, keeping his tone casual while his peripheral vision tracked movement through the side window. The blue sedan had repositioned, now angled for optimal view of the back entrance. "Busy. The data migration project is behind schedule, but the team is solid." Sarah scraped diced onions into a sizzling pan. "How about you? Still doing security consulting?" "Among other things." Mike's deliberately vague answer concealed the specialized work he still occasionally performed for former colleagues who valued his particular skill set. "Sarah, have you noticed any unfamiliar vehicles in the neighborhood lately?" Her knife paused mid-chop. "Dad, please don't start." Blue sedan, 2 houses down. Been there at least 40 minutes. Sarah's shoulders tensed. This is exactly why Mom couldn't handle it anymore. Not everything is a threat assessment. The mention of his ex-wife stung, but Mike kept his expression neutral. Their divorce 11 years ago had been amicable on paper, devastating in reality. Claire had finally reached her breaking point with the hypervigilance, the classified absences, the parts of himself he could never fully bring home. "Just making an observation," he said, his tone deliberately lighter. "Professional hazard. It's a quiet neighborhood. People visit friends. Deliveries happen." Sarah's knife resumed its rhythmic chopping with more force than necessary. "Not everything needs tactical analysis." Mike recognized the familiar frustration in her voice, the same tone Claire had used when his security protocols disrupted normal family life. The locked doors that required specific knock patterns. The memorized evacuation routes from every location. The go-bags always packed and ready. He decided to try a different approach. "Any plans for your security system upgrade? The one we talked about last month?" "Dad, I don't need military-grade security for a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. Standard. Systems have predictable vulnerabilities. Normal people don't have enemies plotting to exploit security vulnerabilities," Sarah interrupted. dropping pasta into boiling water with a splash. I have homeowner's insurance and a standard alarm. That's plenty. Mike absorbed her irritation without visible reaction, a skill perfected through countless high-stress operations. He moved to the window, using the motion of reaching for his water glass to check the blue sedan again. It had departed. That was either reassuring or concerning, depending on the operator's intent. Your back door deadbolt is installed incorrectly, he noted, keeping his voice conversational. The strike plate has exposed screws. 3 minutes. With a screwdriver would neutralize it. Sarah set her wooden spoon down with deliberate control. Dad, I love you, but this paranoia has got to stop. This isn't Afghanistan or wherever your last classified location was. This is Maple Creek Estates, where the biggest crime last year was Mrs. Peterson's missing garden gnomes. Mike recognized the building tension and strategically retreated. You're right. Sorry. The concession was tactical rather than genuine. He'd learned that certain battles weren't worth fighting directly. Dinner progressed with careful conversation about safer topics. Sarah's promotion prospects, her friend Rachel's upcoming wedding, Mike's new woodworking project. But throughout the meal, Mike maintained his habitual awareness, calculating distance to exits, identifying improvised weapons, establishing defensive positions. These weren't conscious choices but ingrained behaviors that had kept him alive. Through multiple combat deployments. As he prepared to leave, Mike made one final attempt. Sarah, just humor me. Keep your doors locked even during the day, and maybe consider a motion-activated floodlight for the back entrance. Sarah's expression softened slightly at his obvious concern. Dad, I'm a grown woman who's lived alone for years. I know basic safety measures. Of course you do. He hesitated, then added, but if you notice that sedan again or anything that feels off, call me, day or night. The only thing off around here is your threat radar, she said, her tone gentler than her words. Not everything is dangerous. Some things are just normal life. Mike nodded and accepted her quick hug, knowing further warnings would only widen the distance between them. As he drove away, he circled the neighborhood twice, confirming the blue sedan was gone. For now, the tactical assessment continued automatically as he drove home. Surveillance operation. Professional duration and positioning. Not law enforcement. Wrong vehicle profile and insufficient manpower. Not random. Too focused on specific sightlines to Sarah's property. In his gut, Mike knew something was forming. A pattern emerging from background noise. The kind of subtle shift in environment that had saved his team countless times in hostile territory. But this wasn't a remote village or urban warfare zone. This was his daughter's peaceful suburban neighborhood. And after years of his hypervigilance, straining their relationship, he couldn't risk pushing harder without concrete evidence. So Mike did what he'd done throughout his career when operational parameters restricted direct action. He prepared contingencies, maintained surveillance, and waited for the threat to become clear enough that even civilians couldn't deny its existence. He just hoped that clarity wouldn't come at too high a price. Sarah Reynolds knew something was wrong before her key touched the lock. The front door stood slightly ajar, perhaps 3 millimeters of space between door and frame, invisible to most. But Sarah had grown up with a father who noticed such details, who had trained her despite her resistance to recognize them too. She froze on the porch, her messenger bag suddenly heavy on her shoulder. The neighbor's sprinklers ticked rhythmically across the lawn. A dog barked 3 houses down. Normal suburban sounds that now seemed distant and irrelevant compared to that sliver of space that shouldn't exist. Sarah pulled her phone from her pocket, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. Standard procedure, as her father would say. But something stopped her, some inherited instinct for tactical assessment before action. She stepped back from the door, scanning the neighborhood with new awareness. No strange vehicles, no obvious observers. The houses on either side showed no signs of disturbance. This could be nothing. Perhaps she hadn't fully closed the door that morning, though she distinctly remembered the deadbolt clicking into place. Years of her father's security protocols had made certain habits automatic, regardless of how much she dismissed them verbally. Her pulse quickened as she circled to the side of the house, keeping close to the azalea bushes for concealment. The rational part of her brain mocked this behavior, creeping around her own home like she was in one of her father's combat scenarios. But the deeper, instinctual part recognized the wrongness ahead. The side window to her home office showed no signs of forced entry. The back door appeared untouched. Had she overreacted? Was this another case of seeing threats where none existed? the hypervigilance she'd criticized her father for so often. Sarah returned to the front, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open with her elbow, avoiding fingerprints on instinct. The destruction inside stole her breath. Her living room had been methodically taken apart. The couch cushions were removed and precisely arranged on the floor. The bookshelves had been emptied, each book examined and returned, not thrown, but placed back with eerie orderliness. Picture frames had been removed from walls, their backs opened, then reassembled. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a search. Sarah stepped carefully into the room, her body automatically moving along the wall rather than crossing the open space. Another unconscious habit from childhood games her father had taught her. Hide and seek with tactical objectives. Escape and evasion drills disguised as play. The kitchen showed the same methodical invasion. Drawers emptied but contents arranged by type. Cabinet doors open but nothing broken. Whoever had done this was looking for something specific, and they were professionals. Sarah's home office hit her hardest. Her computer was gone. External hard drives missing. The filing cabinet drawers stood open, papers removed but stacked neatly on her desk. Even her printer had been disassembled and reassembled, as if something might have been hidden inside. The bedroom continued the pattern, clothing removed from drawers but folded beside them. Mattress shifted but not slashed. The intruders had even examined her jewelry box, taking nothing despite several valuable pieces inside. When Sarah reached her closet, she finally understood. The cardboard box of her father's military memorabilia, the one he'd given her for safekeeping years ago, claiming he was decluttering, was gone. The empty space on the shelf screamed its absence. Sarah sank onto the edge of her bed, the reality of the situation washing over her. This wasn't a random break-in. This was targeted, professional, and it had something to do with her father's past. With shaking hands, she finally called 911. The police arrived 17 minutes later, an eternity during which Sarah remained perched on her bed, afraid to touch anything, her mind racing through possible explanations. The responding officers were professional but clearly categorized the break-in as routine, despite its unusual characteristics. No obvious forced entry, noted Officer Collins, examining the front door. They likely used a bump key or similar non-destructive entry method. Pretty neat for burglars, his partner observed, surveying the methodically searched living room. Usually they trash the place. Some crews are getting sophisticated, Collins replied. They spend more time and leave less evidence. Makes it harder to prove what they took when insurance claims come in. Sarah followed them through the house, answering questions about missing items. Yes, her laptop and external drives were gone. No, she couldn't immediately identify other missing possessions beyond her father's memorabilia box. No, she hadn't noticed suspicious activity in the neighborhood. The lie sticking in her throat as she remembered her father's warning about the blue sedan. We'll dust for prints, but honestly, with this level of organization, I wouldn't expect much, Officer Collins told her as his partner photographed the scene. These crews usually wear gloves, and they've clearly been careful. As the officers continued their investigation, Sarah found herself drawn to the back door. Something about it nagged at her memory. Something her father had mentioned once about tactical markers. She examined the doorframe carefully, her fingers finding a small notch on the exterior side. 3 precise cuts in the wood, each exactly 5 millimeters apart. Not random damage, but deliberate marking. Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't just any break-in. This was military precision. Professional operators, the kind her father had worked with and against throughout his career. The police finished their investigation with practiced efficiency, promising to file a report and follow up if they developed any leads. Their subdued expectation of success was clear. This would likely become another unsolved property crime in their statistics. As the patrol car pulled away, Sarah stood in her methodically violated home, the silence pressing in around her. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she contemplated the call she didn't want to make. The call that would mean admitting her father's paranoia had been justified all along. The call that would inevitably pull her into whatever shadow from his past had found its way to her door. Sarah took a deep breath and dialed, each number feeling like a step away from the normal life she'd carefully constructed and toward the dangerous world her father had always inhabited. "Dad," she said when he answered on the first ring. "Someone broke into my house." A pause as she swallowed her pride. "I think it's connected to you." Mike Reynolds' voice came through with the calm, focused tone she remembered from childhood emergencies, the tone that had always simultaneously reassured and terrified her because it confirmed real danger existed. "I'm on my way. Touch nothing further. Stay in sight of windows where neighbors can see you. I'll be there in 27 minutes. The line went dead, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that her life had just fundamentally changed. Whatever normal had existed before she turned her key in that door was gone now, replaced by the shadowy world of threats and countermeasures her father had lived in for decades. The world she had spent her adult life pretending didn't exist. Sarah waited by the front window, watching for her father's arrival. Her eyes kept returning to the precisely arranged items throughout her living room. The methodical nature of the search, the missing box of military memorabilia. Someone from her father's past had found him through her, and they weren't finished yet. Sarah paced her living room, phone clutched in her hand, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. The police had left 20 minutes ago, taking their illusion of security with them. Now she faced the choice she'd been avoiding since discovering the break-in. Admitting her father had been right all along. Her thumb hovered over his contact entry. Michael Reynolds, not Dad in her phone. A small act of emotional distance she'd established years ago. The formality helped maintain boundaries between her carefully constructed normal life and his world of hypervigilance and classified operations. Sarah's mind flashed back to childhood, her father returning from another long absence, his eyes different each time. Harder, more distant, the way he'd check sightlines through windows instead of looking at her artwork. The midnight drills. If someone comes, hide here. If you hear this signal, run there. If I say this phrase, do exactly as I say without question. Her mother had tried to explain it. Daddy's work is very important, but it's secret. He protects people. But as Sarah grew older, those explanations felt insufficient against the reality of living with a man whose attention was always partially elsewhere, scanning for threats in grocery stores and school playgrounds. The divorce had been inevitable. Her mother had finally reached her breaking point when Sarah was 21. "I can't live my whole life in condition yellow," she'd said, using one of Mike's own tactical awareness terms. Sarah had chosen to stay with her mother, a decision that created the first major rift with her father. Now, staring at the methodical disarray of her violated home, Sarah recognized the precision she'd seen in her father's movements her entire life. The same careful, thorough search patterns, the same attention to detail. Whoever had done this operated like her father, with tactical purpose and military discipline. With a deep breath, Sarah pressed the call button. 1 ring, 2. Her father always answered promptly, but now she found herself hoping for voicemail, a reprieve from Sarah. His voice came through crisp and alert despite the late hour. No sleepiness, no confusion, just immediate focused attention. "Dad," she began, the word feeling strange after months of formal Michael during their increasingly infrequent interactions. The sentence faltered as the reality of the situation overwhelmed her. "What's wrong?" His tone shifted subtly, detecting the stress in her single-word greeting. "My house was broken into today." The admission felt like surrender. Silence for 2 precise seconds. Then, "Are you physically safe right now?" "Yes. The police have been here. They're gone now." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Is the point of entry secured?" The EDO questions came in rapid succession. Not emotional inquiries about her well-being, but tactical assessment. This was why she'd hesitated to call. This was the father she knew. The operator first, parent second. "Dad, stop. Just..." Sarah took a breath. "Yes, the doors are locked. The police said they used some kind of special key that didn't leave marks. Bump key or tension wrench with pick. Standard non-destructive entry." His voice had the flat affect she recognized from crisis situations. "What was taken?" "My laptop. External hard drives." She paused. "And that box of your military stuff from the closet. The one you gave me to keep a few years ago." The silence that followed lasted precisely 5 seconds. When Mike spoke again, his voice had shifted. The subtle change imperceptible to most. But to Sarah, who had grown up cataloging her father's micro-expressions for signs of danger, it was obvious. Something about the box mattered. "What else did they take?" "Nothing that I've noticed. They didn't even take my jewelry." Describe the search pattern. Sarah found herself responding automatically, falling into the precise observational language he'd taught her years ago. Methodical, thorough. Every container opened and contents examined. Items removed but replaced in organized groups. No unnecessary damage. Professional operators, he confirmed, not common burglars. The validation of her own assessment should have been comforting. Instead, it sent a chill through her. If her father, with his decades of special operations experience, classified this as professional, the situation was far worse than a simple break-in. "Dad," Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "What was in that box?" Another calculated pause. "We shouldn't discuss it over unsecured communications." Typical. The familiar frustration rose in Sarah's chest. Even now, with her home violated and her safety potentially at risk, the classified habits remained. "They came into my house because of you," she said, anger edging into her voice. "I deserve to know why." "You're right." His concession surprised her. "But not over the phone. I'm coming over. I can be there in 27 minutes. It's almost midnight. 26 now." Sarah recognized the futility of argument. When her father shifted into operational mode, normal considerations like time of day became irrelevant. "Fine, pack a bag," he added before she could end the call. "Essentials only. 3 days worth. I'm not leaving my house. Sarah." His voice held that rare note of naked emotion that had always disarmed her as a child. The brief glimpses of the man beneath the operator. "Please, just have it ready. We'll discuss options when I arrive." The call ended, and Sarah stood in her searched living room, the silence pressing in around her. She glanced at the precise piles of her possessions, the methodical invasion of her privacy, and felt a creeping certainty that her father was right. This wasn't over. Despite her resistance, Sarah found herself moving to her bedroom, pulling out the duffel bag she used for weekend trips. Her hands automatically selected practical clothing, toiletries, medications, essential documents. Her movements efficient and focused, just as he had taught her during those childhood games that now revealed themselves as preparation for exactly this scenario. "This is temporary," she told herself firmly as she zipped the bag. "Just a precaution." But as she placed the bag by the door, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a threshold, that the careful boundary she'd constructed between her normal life and her father's world of threats and countermeasures was dissolving. She moved to the kitchen, suddenly craving tea, something normal and soothing. As she filled the kettle, a memory surfaced. Age 12, watching her father check their home after returning from a 3-month absence. His methodical movement through each room, checking corners, window locks, sight lines. Her mother's tight smile. "Daddy just needs to make sure everything's safe." The kettle whistled, jolting Sarah back to the present. She poured the water over a tea bag, the familiar ritual calming her slightly. Then her eyes caught on the knife block across the counter. The largest blade had been removed and placed beside it during the search, then returned at a slightly different angle. Professional operators, in her home, handling her possessions, seeking something connected to her father's past. The doorbell rang exactly 26 minutes after their call ended. Sarah moved to the entrance, checking the peephole out of ingrained habit. Her father stood on the porch, his posture casual to any observer but alert to her knowing eye. A small go-bag hung from his shoulder, always prepared, always ready to move. She opened the door, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. Mike Reynolds had aged well, his 60 years evident only in the silver at his temples and the deeper lines around his eyes. His body remained solid, his movements economical and precise. He wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, Henley shirt, lightweight jacket. But there was nothing civilian about his bearing. "You packed," he noted, spotting her duffel by the door. "Just a precaution," Sarah insisted. "I'm not leaving." Mike nodded once, neither agreeing nor arguing. He stepped inside, his eyes already performing the rapid environmental scan she'd watched her entire life. Exits, potential weapons, defensive positions, vulnerabilities. "Show me," he said simply, as Sarah led him through her violated home, watching him examine the search pattern with professional assessment. She felt the strange duality that had defined their relationship. The resentment of his military habits colliding with the security of having someone who truly understood threats most people never perceived. "Dad," she said as he inspected the precisely replaced couch cushions, "what was in that box that would make professionals target my house?" Mike straightened, his expression carefully neutral. "It's complicated. Don't." Sarah's voice hardened. "Don't you dare hide behind classified protocols right now. They were in my house because of you. I need to know why." Her father studied her for a long moment, his tactical assessment shifting to something more personal. weighing operational security against her right to know. Finally, he nodded. You're right. But first I need to clear the house properly and check for surveillance devices. Then we'll talk. It wasn't everything, but it was more concession than she'd expected. Sarah nodded. There's fresh coffee in the kitchen. This will take about 15 minutes. As her father began his methodical security sweep, Sarah watched with the strange sensation of witnessing the convergence of her two worlds. The hyper-vigilant military father she'd spent years trying to distance herself from, and the ordinary civilian life she'd carefully constructed. That ordinary life had been shattered today by the methodical invasion of her home. And despite years of dismissing her father's security concerns as paranoia, Sarah couldn't deny the cold reality. He had been right all along. There were threats in the shadows, and now those threats had found their way to her door. Mike Reynolds moved through his daughter's home with the methodical precision of a combat operator in hostile territory. His body maintained the appearance of casual movement while his eyes conducted a professional security assessment that most civilians would never recognize. He started at the point of entry, the front door, knelt to examine the lock mechanism, noting the subtle scratch marks consistent with a tension wrench and pick set rather than a bump key. High-end equipment, professional technique. No forced entry, no broken hardware, minimal evidence. They spent approximately 45 seconds on this lock, he noted, more to himself than to Sarah, who watched from a few feet away. Standard quickset, no secondary deadbolt or security bar. First vulnerability. Sarah folded her arms across her chest. Not everyone lives in a fortress, Dad. Mike acknowledged her comment with a slight nod but continued his assessment. Window locks. Inadequate. Sight lines from neighboring properties, partially obstructed by landscaping, providing cover for approach. Exterior lighting. Insufficient for proper perimeter control. He moved through each room, examining not just the obvious signs of intrusion, but the tactical implications of furniture placement, blind corners, defensive positions. His hands occasionally traced surfaces, checking for the nearly invisible residue of surveillance equipment adhesive. They were here for approximately 38 minutes, he concluded, noting the methodical search pattern. 3-person team. 1 primary searcher, 1 overwatch, 1 exterior security. How could you possibly know that? Sarah asked, skepticism edging her voice. Search pattern efficiency. Variations in technique between main living areas and peripheral rooms. Standardized stack formation for the items they examined. He gestured to the precisely arranged piles of books and documents. This is military precision. Specialized training. Mike knelt to examine a particular pile of documents on Sarah's coffee table. They were looking for something specific but weren't certain of its form. Paper documents, electronic media, physical objects, all thoroughly examined. The police said it was just sophisticated burglars. Mike gave her a look that Sarah recognized from childhood. The one that said civilians didn't understand the realities of his world. Burglars prioritize high-value, easily transportable items. Jewelry, cash, electronics that can be quickly resold. He pointed to her untouched jewelry box. They left items worth thousands but took your father's military memorabilia. That wasn't a financial calculation. That was an operational objective. Sarah felt a chill at his shift to third person. Your father, rather than a linguistic distancing technique he used when transitioning into full tactical assessment mode. It was as if the father temporarily disappeared, replaced by the operator. Mike continued his examination, moving to the home office where Sarah's computer equipment had been taken. His fingers traced the desk surface, noting the dust patterns where items had been removed. They imaged your drives before taking the physical hardware, he observed. Dust pattern shows equipment displacement consistent with connection of external devices prior to removal. Why would they copy my data before taking my computer? Insurance. In case physical extraction was compromised, they'd still have acquired the target intelligence. His expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught the subtle tension in his shoulders. What was on your computer, Sarah? Work files? Personal data? Nothing classified, if that's what you're asking, she replied defensively. I'm a data analyst. For a healthcare software company, not a spy. Mike nodded, accepting her answer while clearly forming his own assessment. He moved to the closet where the missing box had been stored, examining the empty shelf space. The box I gave you, he said carefully. Did you ever open it? Sarah hesitated. Yes, once, a few years ago. What did you observe inside? Some medals, photographs, dog tags that weren't yours. A couple of old notebooks with what looked like coded entries. She studied her father's face, looking for reactions. I assumed it was sentimental stuff you didn't have space for after downsizing to the condo. Mike's expression remained carefully neutral, but Sarah had grown up learning to read the micro-expressions most people missed. The slight tightening around his eyes, the momentary stillness in his breathing pattern. Whatever had been in that box was significant. Did you digitize any of the contents? Photographs of the items? Scans of documents? No, Sarah started, then corrected herself. Wait, I might have taken a photo of one of the medals to look up what it was for. I don't remember if I kept it. Which medal? The star-shaped one with the blue center. Silver star. Mike supplied automatically. Where would that photo be stored? Cloud accounts? Social media? Probably just on my phone, which backs up to my cloud account. Sarah's unease deepened at his continued focus. Dad, what's going on? What was really in that box? Mike finished his examination of the closet, then straightened to his full height. For a moment, the professional operator facade slipped, and Sarah glimpsed genuine concern in her father's eyes. Insurance, he said finally. Things I needed preserved, but couldn't risk keeping in my possession. That's not a real answer. It's all I can give you right now. He gestured toward the living room. Let's finish the security assessment. The next 30 minutes continued in similar fashion, Mike examining entry points, sight lines, security, vulnerabilities, while Sarah's frustration mounted at his evasiveness. He checked her backyard perimeter, tested window latches, examined the garage access point. Your home has 17 exploitable entry vulnerabilities, he concluded as they returned to the living room. 5 critical, requiring immediate remediation. I've lived here 3 years without incident, Sarah pointed out. Until today. The simple observation landed with uncomfortable weight. Sarah sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted by the day's events and her father's intensive assessment. Dad, please. Just tell me what's happening. Why would someone target my house because of your old military box? Mike considered her for a long moment, weighing operational security against her need to know. Finally, he sat across from her, his posture shifting subtly from tactical operator to concerned father. The items in that box are connected to an operation from 15 years ago. Sensitive intelligence that implicated certain powerful individuals in activities they wouldn't want exposed. What kind of operation? What individuals? Mike shook his head slightly. The specifics remain classified. What matters now is that someone believes I retained evidence from that operation, and they've tracked it to you through a box of memorabilia. Sarah's skepticism was evident. That memorabilia contained embedded data. Microfilm concealed in the backing of the dog. Tags. Cryptographic keys disguised as handwritten journal entries. The medals themselves carried no intelligence value. They were genuine. Sarah stared at her father, processing this revelation. The innocuous-seeming box had contained hidden intelligence, and now unknown professionals had violated her home to acquire it. Why did you give it to me? Why involve me in something dangerous? Pain flickered across Mike's face. It wasn't supposed to be dangerous. The operation was long dormant. The principals believed to be inactive or deceased. It was insurance that I never expected to need. He met her eyes directly. I would never knowingly put you at risk, Sarah. She wanted to be angry, at his secrecy, at the invasion of her home, at being drawn into his shadowy world, but the genuine regret in his expression diffused her anger. So what happens now? She asked. Will they come back? Mike's expression turned grimly professional again. The fact that they conducted a precision search rather than a direct confrontation suggests they're uncertain about what specifically they're seeking or if they've acquired it. They may conduct surveillance to assess your response to the break-in. They may attempt electronic intrusion to access your cloud accounts. Jesus, Dad. Which is why we need to relocate you temporarily until I can determine threat scope and implement countermeasures. Leave my home because of your classified past? That's not happening. Mike leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Sarah, these aren't common criminals. These are trained operators with military or intelligence backgrounds. They've already violated your home once. The next incursion could be more direct if they determine you have information they need. The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Sarah had spent years dismissing her father's security concerns as paranoia, but the methodical violation of her home made his warnings impossible to ignore. 2 days. She conceded finally. I'll stay somewhere else for 2 days while you do whatever it is you do. But I'm not abandoning my life because of your past. Mike nodded, accepting the compromise. Pack essentials only. Clothes, medications, irreplaceable personal items. Leave electronics here. They may be compromised. My phone. Factory reset before we leave. I'll show you how to wipe it properly. Sarah wanted to argue further, but the calm efficiency in her father's demeanor stopped her. This wasn't paranoia or overreaction. This was the professional assessment of a man who had spent decades identifying and countering threats most people never perceived. As she moved to her bedroom to pack, Sarah noticed her father placing something small and metallic on her windowsill. A nearly invisible tripwire trigger disguised as a decorative element. "What's that?" "Passive intrusion detection," he replied without looking up. "Non-electronic. Will show if entry occurs while we're gone." Sarah watched him work, his movements precise and practiced. She had spent years trying to distance herself from this world. The hypervigilance, the security protocols, the constant awareness of threats. Yet now she found herself grateful for the very skills she had rejected. "Where will we go?" she asked, returning to practical concerns. "Secure location. Off-grid." At her skeptical look, he added, "A cabin owned by a former colleague. No digital footprint, no connection to either of us." Sarah nodded, surprising herself with her acquiescence. The emotional whiplash of the day, from dismissing her father's warnings to witnessing the methodical invasion of her home to now accepting his security protocols, left her feeling untethered. As she packed her bag, selecting items with the practiced efficiency he had taught her years ago, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed different somehow, her eyes carrying the same watchful awareness she had always noticed in her father's gaze. For years, she had worked to escape his world of threats and countermeasures. Now that world had found her anyway, and the boundary between his reality and hers had dissolved with a single violated door lock. Mike appeared in the doorway, his go-bag already packed and ready. The contrast between them was stark, her hasty packing versus his perpetual readiness. 5 minutes, he said quietly. "We'll take the back exit. Avoid predictable routes." Sarah nodded, zipping her bag with newfound resolve. Whatever was happening, whatever. Shadows from her father's past had found their way to her door. She would face it with the same clarity and focus she had always admired and resented in him. "I'm ready," she said, surprised to find she meant it. As they moved through her violated home toward the back door, Mike paused, his hand briefly touching her shoulder, a rare physical gesture from a man who compartmentalized emotion as thoroughly as he secured perimeters. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of distance between them. "I never wanted my world to touch yours." The simple admission held more genuine emotion than 1,000 standard apologies. Sarah recognized the cost of such vulnerability from a man who had spent his life guarding against exposure of any kind. "Let's go," she replied softly. "You can brief me on operational parameters en route." The ghost of a smile touched his lips at her deliberate use of his terminology, a small acknowledgement of their shared language, buried beneath years of distance, but never truly forgotten. Together they slipped out the back door into the gathering darkness, leaving behind the illusion of ordinary life that had been shattered by the methodical precision of unknown operators. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the shadowy world her father had inhabited for decades. Sarah Reynolds had spent years convincing herself that her father's hypervigilance was paranoia, his security protocols unnecessary, his worldview distorted by classified operations. Now, as they moved silently through her backyard using the tactical positioning he had taught her in childhood, Sarah faced the uncomfortable realization that had been building since finding her front door ajar. Her father had been right all along, and the skills she had spent a lifetime dismissing might now be the only things keeping them both alive. Sarah's apartment felt emptier with each security measure her father installed. In the 3 hours since she had agreed to the temporary relocation, Mike had transformed her home into a passive monitoring system. Simple tripwires disguised as decorative elements, dust patterns precisely arranged to reveal disturbance, nearly invisible UV markers on key surfaces. "Is all this really necessary?" she asked, watching him install a wireless camera disguised as a smoke detector. "We're leaving anyway." "Early warning systems," Mike replied without pausing his work. "We'll know if they return, what they touch, what they're still looking for." Sarah leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "If they're as professional as you say, won't they detect these countermeasures?" "Some, yes. That's intentional." He secured the final screw on the camera housing. Observable security deters casual intrusion. Concealed measures document sophisticated penetration. The clinical terminology made Sarah's skin crawl, a reminder that her home had become an operational zone in whatever shadow conflict had spilled over from her father's past. How long until we can leave? I need to let work know I'll be remote tomorrow. Mike checked his watch. 23 minutes, and use a prearranged excuse for your absence. Medical emergency or family matter? Nothing. That suggests security concerns. I know how to lie, Dad. The words came out sharper than intended, carrying the weight of years of forced explanations for her father's classified absences. I learned from the best. Mike's hands stilled momentarily, the only acknowledgement of the hit. Then he continued, checking the camera feed on his secure tablet, his expression neutral, the silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken tensions and old wounds. Sarah had spent years establishing independence from her father's world, his hypervigilance, his compartmentalized emotions, his perpetual operational readiness. Now circumstances had forced her back into that world, and the familiar patterns were re-emerging with unsettling ease. I need to pack a few more things, she said, retreating to her bedroom. Once alone, Sarah leaned against the closed door, taking slow, measured breaths to calm the anxiety building in her chest. The violation of her home had been traumatic enough. Now she faced days in close quarters with the father she had deliberately distanced herself from, navigating not just their complicated relationship, but an unknown threat connected to his classified past. She moved to her dresser, selecting practical clothing suitable for various scenarios, a habit from childhood just-in-case preparations that had apparently never fully left her. As she packed, her eyes caught on the small silver frame on her nightstand, one of the few photos she had of all three of them together, taken during a rare family vacation when she was 12, before her father's longest deployment, before her mother's patience had finally eroded. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah slipped the photo into her bag. When she returned to the living room, Mike was speaking quietly into his phone, his posture alert, but his tone casual, the calculated normality he adopted for potentially monitored communications. Just a short fishing trip. Nothing elaborate. He glanced at Sarah. Yes, she's coming along. Been too long since we had father-daughter time. A pause. Appreciate that, Bill. I'll send photos of any decent catches. He ended the call and immediately removed the battery from the phone, a habit Sarah remembered from childhood. Her father's insistence on air-gapping devices after sensitive communications. Cover story established, he explained. If anyone inquires about our whereabouts, we're on a fishing trip to Lake Michigan. Notifications of our location have been seeded through appropriate channels. Who was that? Former colleague. Reliable. Will corroborate if needed. The clipped, efficient responses reminded Sarah why conversations with her father had grown so strained over the years. Everything tactical, everything compartmentalized. Information provided on strictly need-to-know basis, even for mundane matters. Is there anything else I should pack? She asked, deliberately shifting to practical concerns. Mike assessed her bag with a professional eye. Clothing appears adequate. Add any essential medications. Leave credit cards. Use only the cash I provided. Any electronics should be factory reset before we depart. Sarah had already wiped her phone as instructed, the process erasing thousands of photos and messages, another small violation caused by the break-in. She had backed up essential data to her cloud account but felt strangely untethered without her digital history. I'm ready, she said, hoisting her bag. Mike nodded once, then moved to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator and methodically rearranged several items. Milk carton shifted 2 inches left. Apple juice rotated 30 degrees. Leftovers container moved to a different shelf. What are you doing now? Establishing baselines, he replied. If someone searches the house again, these patterns will be disturbed in ways distinct from normal usage. Jesus, Dad. You've been out of active service for what, 8 years? And you still do this? Mike closed the refrigerator door. Some habits keep you alive long enough to develop them. The simple statement hung between them, a glimpse of the mindset that had shaped him through decades of classified operations in hostile territories. For a brief moment, Sarah saw not the hypervigilant father who had disrupted her childhood with security protocols, but the operator who had survived environments where such vigilance was necessary. They left through the back door, Mike leading them on a circuitous route that avoided street cameras and maintained maximum cover from adjacent properties. Sarah found herself automatically matching his movements, staying in shadows, minimizing exposure, maintaining sightlines, the childhood games reasserting themselves through muscle memory she hadn't realized she retained. Mike's vehicle wasn't his usual nondescript sedan, but a 10-year-old pickup truck with Wisconsin plates. Borrowed, he explained before she could ask. Clean history, no digital footprint. The interior smelled of pine air freshener and old leather. As Sarah settled into the passenger seat, she noticed the modifications: reinforced door panels, specialized communications equipment disguised as standard radio, hidden compartments beneath the seats. Another colleague's vehicle? Mike nodded as he started the engine. Former teammate. Still maintains operational resources. They drove in silence for several miles, taking a deliberately indirect route out of the city. Sarah watched her father's methodical driving, varying speeds, changing lanes with precise timing, maintaining optimal distance from other vehicles. The operator was fully present now, civilian facade set aside for tactical movement. Where exactly are we going? She finally asked. Secure location approximately 90 minutes northwest. Rural property owned through shell corporations. No. Connection to my official identity or service record. Of course you have a secret cabin in the woods, Sarah muttered. The corner of Mike's mouth twitched slightly. Almost a smile. Not mine. Belongs to a former team member. Carter. You met him once when you were 14. The name triggered a vague memory. A tall man with a quiet laugh who had appeared briefly at their home between her father's deployments. He had taught her a card trick that involved memorizing the deck order. The communications specialist? Mike glanced at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Yes, you remember. I remember more than you think, Dad. Sarah turned to look out the window at the passing cityscape. I paid attention to your world, even when I didn't want to be part of it. The admission shifted something in the atmosphere between them. Not quite reconciliation, but an acknowledgement of shared history beyond the current crisis. They continued in silence as the urban environment gave way to suburbs and then rural darkness. Mike maintained his tactical driving pattern, taking unexpected turns and doubling back occasionally to detect any possible surveillance. Sarah found herself scanning the road behind them, checking side mirrors for repeat appearances of the same vehicles, another childhood habit resurfacing. See anything? Mike asked, noticing her vigilance. No. She hesitated, but I'm not sure I would know what to look for. It's been a long time since our surveillance detection games. You'd know, he said with quiet confidence. Some skills don't fade. The simple vote of confidence, so rare from her taciturn father, landed with unexpected weight. For years Sarah had defined herself in opposition to his world. Now she found herself drawing on the very training she had resented. As the truck turned onto a gravel access road, headlights briefly illuminating dense forest on either side, Sarah faced the uncomfortable reality. Her father's classified past had caught up with them both, and surviving whatever came next might depend on embracing rather than rejecting the skills he had instilled in her. The secure cabin awaited somewhere in the darkness ahead, along with whatever revelations would finally explain why unknown operators had violated her home and upended her carefully constructed normal life. The cabin materialized from the darkness like a tactical objective. No exterior lights, minimal thermal signature, optimal defensive positioning against the tree line. Mike took a final counter-surveillance loop before approaching, his headlights off for the last quarter mile. Standard approach protocol, he explained, noticing Sarah's questioning look. Assume observation until confirmed otherwise. The structure itself was deceptively rustic. Weathered cedar exterior concealing reinforced construction. Solar panels disguised as roofing material. Satellite communications mast as standard television equipment. A civilian would see a typical hunting cabin. Mike saw a hardened safe house with multiple egress options and defensive positions. Wait here, he instructed, parking the truck in a natural depression that concealed its profile from aerial observation. Sarah watched as her father performed a perimeter check with practiced efficiency, moving from shadow to shadow, checking passive intrusion indicators, visually clearing potential sniper positions in the surrounding forest. His movements were fluid and precise, revealing the operator beneath the civilian facade. He returned 8 minutes later. Location secure. No signs of compromise. The cabin interior surprised Sarah with its comfortable simplicity. Rustic furniture. Well-stocked kitchen. Generator power with solar backup. Not the Spartan safe house she had imagined, but a functional living space designed for extended occupation. Carter maintains this location for various contingencies. Mike explained, securing the reinforced door behind them. "It's off official records, purchased through 3 levels of shell corporations. Your friend seems as paranoid as you are," Sarah observed, dropping her bag on the sofa. "Carter prefers pragmatically prepared." Mike's tone carried rare warmth. 23 years in signals intelligence teaches appropriate caution. Sarah explored the cabin while her father established security protocols, checking communications equipment, confirming power systems, verifying supply caches. The main room held a stone fireplace with properly seasoned wood stacked nearby. The kitchen contained non-perishable supplies with distant expiration dates. 2 bedrooms extended from the central area, each with escape routes disguised as standard windows. Everything casual on the surface, tactical underneath. "Like her father himself. Hungry?" Mike asked, returning from his security sweep. Sarah realized she hadn't eaten since before discovering the break-in. "Starving, actually." Mike moved to the kitchen with surprising domestic comfort, locating supplies and preparing a simple meal with the same efficiency he applied to operational tasks. Sarah watched him work, struck by the dichotomy between this competent, self-sufficient man and the emotionally distant father she had grown up with. They ate in relative silence, the unfamiliar intimacy of shared space highlighting the years of carefully maintained distance between them. When they finished, Mike cleared the dishes with military precision. Each item cleaned, dried, and returned to exact positions. "You should get some rest," he suggested, glancing at his watch. "It's been a high-stress day. Eastern bedroom is prepared." Sarah wanted to argue out of habitual resistance to his directives, but exhaustion was setting in. The adrenaline of the break-in discovery and subsequent evacuation was fading, leaving leaden fatigue in its wake. "What about you?" "I'll monitor communications and establish contact with necessary resources." The operator speaking now, not the father. "We'll begin full assessment protocols in the morning." Sarah nodded, too tired to press for more specific information. She retreated to the indicated bedroom, noting the tactical features disguised as rustic charm: reinforced door, escape route through what appeared to be a decorative window, weapon cache concealed in the nightstand. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Each creak of the cabin's wooden structure triggered heightened awareness. Each rustle of forest vegetation outside the window activated the threat assessment protocols her father had instilled in her as a child. She had spent years in therapy unlearning this hypervigilance, convincing herself it was an unhealthy legacy of her father's paranoia rather than necessary survival skill. Now, lying in a secure cabin after the methodical violation of her home, those dismissals felt naive. Sarah must have eventually drifted off, because the next thing she registered was her father's hand over her mouth, his voice a controlled whisper directly against her ear. "Movement outside. 3 o'clock position. Stay low." He released her immediately, and Sarah found herself fully alert without the normal fog of interrupted sleep. Another childhood conditioning asserting itself, the ability to go from sleep to operational readiness in seconds. Mike moved silently to the window, positioning himself to observe without being observed. Sarah joined him, maintaining the tactical positioning he had taught her, below sight lines, utilizing available cover, minimizing profile. Outside, moonlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the clearing. At first, Sarah saw nothing unusual. Then her eyes caught it, a flicker of movement too controlled to be wildlife, too deliberate to be random. "Contact," she whispered automatically, the terminology surfacing from deep memory. Mike nodded once, approval in his glance. 2 operators. Professional pattern. Maintaining standoff distance. Surveillance, not assault posture. Sarah strained to see what her father's trained eye had instantly identified. Gradually the shapes resolved. 2 figures moving with tactical precision through the forest perimeter, maintaining optimal spacing and communication through subtle hand signals, visible only to those trained to recognize them. "How did they find us?" she breathed, anxiety tightening her chest. Unknown. Potentially followed despite counter-surveillance driving. Potentially traced through secondary connections. Mike's assessment remained clinical despite the implied threat. Current behavior suggests confirmation of presence rather than immediate action. Sarah watched the shadowy figures continue their careful observation of the cabin. Their movements were familiar somehow, the same measured precision she had witnessed in her father countless times. Not random criminals or opportunistic threats, but trained professionals executing practice protocols. "What do we do?" Mike considered for exactly 3 seconds. "Maintain position. Document approach patterns and equipment. Avoid alerting them to our awareness. He moved silently to his bag, extracting a compact device that Sarah recognized as a thermal imaging scope. With practiced efficiency, he documented the observers, their positions, equipment, movement patterns. Recognition signals confirm operational training, he noted after several minutes of observation. Military or agency background, high-end equipment, professional formation. The clinical assessment did nothing to calm Sarah's racing heart. Somehow unknown operators had tracked them to this supposedly secure location within hours of their arrival. Whatever was happening extended far beyond a simple break-in or intelligence search. "Dad," she whispered, the childhood term slipping out unconsciously. "What the hell is going on? Who are these people?" Mike lowered the scope, his expression shifting slightly, the operator briefly giving way to the father. "I believe they're connected to Operation Kingsnake," he said finally. "A classified action from 15 years ago involving high-level intelligence on certain government officials cooperating with cartel interests." Cartel? As in drug cartel? Sarah struggled to connect this revelation to their current situation. "What does that have to do with a box of military memorabilia in my closet? The dog tags you mentioned seeing weren't mine. They belonged to a man named Santiago Vargas, a cartel enforcer who had infiltrated U.S. intelligence operations. He was supposedly killed during the operation, but the body was never recovered with absolute confirmation." Mike returned his attention to the window, where the observers had established surveillance positions with clear sightlines to the cabin. The back of those tags contained microfilm with evidence implicating several officials in illegal cooperation with cartel operations. Names, dates, account numbers, insurance against potential blowback from the operation. "And you kept this in a box in my closet?" Sarah hissed, anger temporarily overriding fear. "It was supposed to be dormant intelligence," Mike replied, his voice remaining calm. "The operation was classified beyond top secret. All participants were either dead or reassigned to deep cover positions. The principals implicated were believed to be inactive or deceased." "Clearly someone didn't get that memo." Sarah gestured toward the observers outside. "Something has changed," Mike acknowledged. "Someone connected to that operation has resurfaced. Someone with resources to track the intelligence and mount a professional recovery operation." He continued documenting the surveillance team's positions and equipment, his movements automatic while his mind processed tactical implications. "These aren't cartel soldiers," he observed. "Their operational patterns indicate formal military or intelligence training. Precision movements, standardized communication signals, professional equipment. So what? Government agents? Foreign operators? Possibly contract personnel? Former military or intelligence operatives working for private interests?" Mike's assessment remained clinically detached despite the danger. "Their current behavior suggests reconnaissance rather than direct action. They're confirming our presence, assessing security measures, establishing patterns." Sarah tried to process this information, connecting it to the methodical search of her home. "So they took the box with the dog tags. Why are they still coming after us? They may be uncertain if they recovered all the intelligence. The microfilm was only part of the evidence. There were cryptographic keys hidden in the journal entries, access protocols disguised as personal notes." Mike turned to her, his expression grave. "More concerning is how quickly they located this position. This location has no connection to my official identity or service record. The property ownership is buried under multiple shell corporations. The fact that they found us here suggests resources beyond standard intelligence channels. The implications hung between them. Whoever was hunting them had reach into classified systems, access to surveillance resources and operational capabilities that rivaled or exceeded government agencies. We need to assume compromise and relocate at first light," Mike decided, returning the thermal scope to his bag. "For now, we maintain awareness without revealing our knowledge of their presence." Sarah stared at the darkened forest where unseen operators maintained surveillance on their position. The secure cabin that had seemed a fortress hours earlier now felt exposed and vulnerable. "Get what rest you can," Mike advised, his tone softening slightly. "I'll maintain watch, 2-hour rotation if needed." "I won't be able to sleep now," Sarah admitted. "Then help me document their positioning." Mike handed her a notepad. "Record times, locations, equipment visible. Note any communication patterns or shift changes." The simple assignment, converting her from protected civilian to operational asset, shifted something in their dynamic. For the first time in years, they were working together rather than maintaining careful distance. as Sarah began documenting the surveillance activity, applying the observational skills her father had taught her years ago. She realized a fundamental truth. The boundary between his world and hers had never really existed. It had been an illusion she had created to feel normal, to feel safe. That illusion, like her sense of security, had been shattered the moment she found her front door ajar. The observers maintained their surveillance throughout the night, rotating positions at precise 90-minute intervals. Mike documented each shift change, building a comprehensive assessment of their operational patterns and equipment. Three-man team, he concluded as the first hints of dawn lightened the forest. Standard surveillance configuration. Primary observer. Communication specialist. Security element. High-end equipment including thermal imaging and satellite communications. Sarah had remained awake despite her exhaustion, the adrenaline of potential threat overriding fatigue. She'd assisted with the surveillance documentation, finding unexpected comfort in the structured task. "What's our exit strategy?" she asked, the operational terminology feeling strangely natural on her tongue. "Indirect egress through the northern forest line," Mike replied, indicating a path invisible to casual observation. "Secondary vehicle cached 2 kilometers northeast. They'll have the primary approach covered, but the terrain to the north provides sufficient cover for controlled withdrawal." He pulled a topographical map from his bag, unfolding it on the kitchen table. Sarah recognized the detailed planning that had gone into this supposed fishing trip. Her father had prepared for contingencies before they'd even left her house. "We move at 0630. Dawn illumination provides sufficient visibility without exposing our departure." Their observation patterns suggest minimum vigilance during shift change, which occurs at approximately 0615 based on established rotation. Sarah studied the map, identifying the extraction route and contingency paths. "What about our belongings?" "Essentials only. 1 bag each. 30-second pack protocol." The directive triggered childhood memories. Emergency drills disguised as games. How quickly can you pack everything important? What would you grab if you had only 30 seconds? Sarah had excelled at these exercises before resentment replaced compliance in her teenage years. "Where are we going?" "Secondary safe location. Deeper cover. No digital footprint. No connection to known associates." Mike folded the map with practiced efficiency. Less comfortable than this cabin, but significantly more secure. While Mike prepared their exit route, Sarah applied the 30-second pack protocol with muscle memory she hadn't realized she retained. Essential clothing, minimal toiletries, documentation secured in waterproof container, no electronics beyond the secure communication device her father had provided. At precisely 0615, Mike signaled readiness with a subtle hand gesture Sarah instantly recognized. They moved silently through the cabin, using predetermined paths that avoided creaking floorboards and visual exposure through windows. The rear exit led to a covered position behind a woodpile, providing concealment from the primary observation points Mike had identified overnight. They paused there while he conducted final surveillance, confirming the predicted shift change in the observation team. "Movement pattern confirmed," he whispered. "Northern egress clear. Stay 3 meters behind. Maintain visual contact. Step placement as trained." Sarah nodded, another childhood protocol surfacing. Follow exactly in the footsteps ahead. Maintain precise distance. Minimize sound signature. The silent walking game that had once seemed like her father's paranoid invention now served a terrifyingly real purpose. They moved through the forest with practiced stealth, Mike selecting their path with tactical precision. Optimal cover, minimal terrain disturbance, maximum concealment from likely observation points. Sarah followed his lead exactly, placing her feet where his had been, matching his movement rhythm, maintaining the specified distance. The morning forest helped mask their withdrawal. Birds resuming normal calls indicated no nearby human presence. Dew-dampened ground minimized sound. Emerging daylight provided just enough visibility without exposing their movement. 15 minutes into their egress, Mike froze in mid-step, his right hand raising in the universal signal for immediate halt. Sarah complied instantly, her body remembering the protocol before her conscious mind processed it. Ahead, barely visible through the trees, a fourth observer moved into position, one they hadn't documented overnight. The operator maintained professional discipline, his movements indicating specialized training beyond standard surveillance protocols. Mike slowly withdrew behind broader cover, signaling Sarah to do the same. Once concealed, he indicated a direction change with minimal hand gestures. 30 degrees west of their planned route. They adjusted course, moving with greater caution now that the surveillance perimeter had proven more extensive than initial assessment suggested. The diversion added time to their extraction, but Mike's expression remained calm, his movements controlled. This was his element. Tactical problem-solving under pressure, adapting to evolving threats, maintaining operational discipline regardless of complications. After 40 minutes of careful movement, they reached a small clearing where a camouflage tarp concealed the outline of a vehicle. Mike conducted a final perimeter check before approaching, verifying no surveillance or tracking devices had been placed since his last visit. The vehicle beneath the tarp was an older model Jeep Wrangler, deliberately weathered to suggest a local hunting vehicle rather than tactical transport. Mike removed the covering with practiced efficiency, folding it into a compact bundle that he stored in the rear compartment. Secondary transport secured, he noted, conducting a rapid mechanical assessment. No signs of tampering or tracking. Devices. Sarah placed her bag in the vehicle, hypervigilance making her scan the surrounding forest constantly. How did they find the cabin? If this location was as secure as you said, 3 possibilities, Mike replied, completing his inspection. 1. They had resources to track our movement despite counter-surveillance driving. 2. The cabin's connection to Carter was compromised through historical operational data. 3. They had active surveillance capabilities beyond standard parameters. He opened the driver's door, his movements deliberate but unhurried despite the implicit threat. All 3 indicate resources beyond normal operational capacity, government-level intelligence access or equivalent private capability. Sarah settled into the passenger seat, processing the implications. So someone with connections to that operation 15 years ago now has access to top-level intelligence resources. That appears to be the current tactical reality, Mike confirmed, starting the engine with minimal noise, which significantly alters our strategic approach. The Jeep moved through the forest on a narrow trail barely visible to untrained eyes. Mike drove with tactical precision, minimal speed variations, optimal line selection for sound reduction, careful attention to terrain features that might reveal their passage. As the forest thinned into rural farmland, Mike finally broke his operational silence. We need to contact Carter. If his connection to this location is compromised, he may be under surveillance as well. Will that expose our position? Not through established channels. Mike extracted a satellite phone unlike any commercial model Sarah had seen. Secure. Communication protocols, frequency hopping transmission, encryption beyond standard military parameters. He dialed a sequence from memory, then spoke in what appeared to be casual conversation about fishing conditions and weather patterns. To Sarah's trained ear, however, the coded message was clear. Location compromised, surveillance confirmed, tactical withdrawal executed, secure communication required. After ending the call, Mike drove in silence for several minutes, processing whatever information had been exchanged. Carter will meet us at the secondary location, he finally said. He's bringing additional resources and intelligence updates. Is he at risk? Implementing appropriate countermeasures, Mike replied, his tone suggesting confidence in his former teammates' capabilities. Carter's operational specialty was always deception and misinformation. He'll establish multiple false indicators while maintaining actual security. They continued through increasingly rural terrain, Mike occasionally implementing counter-surveillance, driving techniques, doubling back, taking unexpected turns, varying speeds to identify potential pursuit. Sarah found herself automatically assisting, watching rear approaches, noting repeat appearances of vehicles, identifying potential observation points. Your situational awareness remains sharp, Mike observed, the closest thing to a compliment in his tactical vocabulary. Apparently some skills never quite disappear, Sarah acknowledged, surprising herself with the absence of resentment in her voice. For years, she had rejected these abilities as unhealthy hypervigilance. Now they felt like necessary survival tools. As they approached a small town, Mike pulled into a gas station, positioning the Jeep for optimal visual coverage of approaching routes. We need to establish communication blackout and validate clean transport, he explained, reaching under the dashboard to remove what appeared to be a standard GPS unit. Any personal electronics were potentially compromised during the home intrusion. We assume active tracking capabilities. Sarah nodded, understanding the protocol. Factory reset on my phone wasn't sufficient? Unlikely. Modern devices maintain recoverable data despite standard reset procedures. Hardware-level tracking is possible with sophisticated resources. He disabled several components in the GPS unit before replacing it, then conducted a thorough sweep of the vehicle using a compact electronic detector. Clean transport confirmed. He concluded, proceed to secondary location with maintained awareness. As they continued their journey, Sarah found herself studying her father with new perspective. His hypervigilance, what she had dismissed for years as paranoia, revealed itself as professional capability honed through decades of operational experience. The precise movements, constant environmental assessment, tactical decision-making that had frustrated her throughout childhood now represented expertise that was keeping them alive. You were right, she said finally, breaking the tactical silence. About the surveillance at my house, about the threat being real. Mike glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to their route. I wish I hadn't been. The simple admission carried more emotional weight than 1,000 apologies. For perhaps the first time, Sarah glimpsed the burden her father had carried throughout her childhood, the knowledge of real threats in a world where most people lived in blissful ignorance, the isolating weight of seeing dangers others dismissed. Where are we going now? She asked, shifting back to practical concerns. Deep cover location. Hunting cabin officially owned by a retired postal worker named Harold Jenkins, in reality an operational safe house established during my final deployment. And it's secure? No. Digital footprint. No connection to military or intelligence records. No link to my official identity or known associates. Mike navigated a particularly remote country road with practiced familiarity. Purchased with cash through civilian cover 15 years ago, as contingency against exactly this type of scenario. Sarah processed this information. Her father had maintained an escape route and safe location for 15 years, prepared for a threat most would consider paranoid fantasy, yet that threat had materialized, just as he had anticipated. How long do we stay there? Until we identify the specific threat actors and their objectives. Mike's expression remained tactically neutral despite the implied timeline uncertainty. Carter will bring additional intelligence and resources. Once we understand who we're dealing with, we can implement appropriate countermeasures. The tactical terminology should have bothered Sarah, another reminder of the classified world she had spent years distancing herself from. Instead, she found unexpected comfort in its precision and clarity. In a situation where nothing was certain, her father's operational approach provided structure and direction. As they turned onto an unmarked dirt road that disappeared into dense forest, Sarah realized she had crossed a threshold. The normal life she had carefully constructed, the deliberate separation from her father's world of threats and countermeasures, had been an illusion of security rather than the reality of it. Now she found herself in tactical retreat from unknown operators, headed to a deep-cover safe house with her former Special Forces father, about to meet a military intelligence specialist bringing classified resources. And strangest of all, it felt less like entering an alien world and more like returning to one she had never truly left. The secondary safe house materialized from the dense forest like a tactical mirage, deliberately unremarkable, strategically positioned for defense, practically invisible until they were upon it. Mike executed a final counter-surveillance loop before approaching, confirming no indication of compromise. Stay in the vehicle until I clear the location, he instructed, retrieving a compact sidearm from beneath his seat, the first time he had openly armed himself since their departure. Sarah nodded, instinctively scanning their surroundings while her father performed a tactical approach to the cabin. His movements shifted subtly, civilian casualness giving way to the precision of a combat operator. Each step deliberate, each visual scan comprehensive, weapon maintained at optimal ready position. The structure itself was more primitive than Carter's cabin. Weathered logs, minimal windows, single visible entrance supplemented by concealed egress points disguised as architectural features. A hunting blind provided elevated observation of the primary approach. A woodpile against the east wall concealed what was likely an emergency cache. After completing his security sweep, Mike signaled Sarah to approach. The familiar hand gesture, thumb and forefinger forming a circle, remaining fingers extended, triggered childhood memories of their safety games. Inside, the cabin was Spartan but functional. Basic furniture, propane appliances, wood stove for heat. No electronics beyond a weather radio. No power beyond a small generator and minimal solar setup disguised as hunting equipment. Location secure, Mike confirmed. No signs of compromise or intrusion since last maintenance visit. When was that? Sarah asked, placing her bag on a rough wooden table. 14 months ago. Standard rotation for deep cover locations. The casual reference to long-term security protocols reminded Sarah how differently they had lived for years. She in deliberate normalcy, he in perpetual operational readiness. Carter will arrive approximately 2 hours after sunset. Mike continued, checking sight lines through strategically placed windows. He's implementing counter-surveillance measures to ensure clean approach. Sarah explored the cabin, main room with basic survival supplies, single bedroom with military-style cots, primitive bathroom. Everything functional but deliberately rustic to maintain cover as a basic hunting retreat. Not exactly the Hilton, she observed. Function over comfort, Mike replied without apology. This location was established for security, not convenience. You maintain this place for 15 years, just in case something like this happened? Mike checked the water catchment system. Operational contingency planning. Standard protocol for sensitive assignments with potential long-term implications. Most people don't live their lives expecting professional hit teams to come after them, Dad. He paused, considering her words. Most people haven't seen what happens when you're unprepared for that possibility. The simple statement carried the weight of classified operations and unspeakable experiences. For the first time, Sarah glimpsed the burden behind her father's hypervigilance, not paranoia, but hard-earned wisdom. As evening approached, Mike prepared the cabin's defenses with methodical precision. Passive alarms on approach paths, observation positions established, emergency escape routes verified. Sarah found herself automatically assisting, falling into patterns established during childhood games that now revealed their true purpose. You remember the protocols, Mike observed, noticing her precise placement of intrusion indicators. Apparently some things stick with you, Sarah acknowledged, even when you spend years in therapy trying to unlearn them. Mike's expression flickered, with something like regret, before returning to tactical neutrality. The training was never meant to burden you, only to protect you. I know that now, Sarah admitted. I just didn't understand it then. As darkness fell, Mike established a communication protocol with Carter. Specific arrival signals, challenge and response phrases, predetermined approach path. Sarah watched him work, recognizing the elements of tradecraft she had glimpsed throughout. Childhood. Dad, she said finally, voicing the question that had been building since their escape. What exactly was Operation Kingsnake? What was in those dog tags that has professionals hunting us 15 years later? Mike considered her question, weighing operational security against her need to know. His expression shifted, the compartmentalized operator giving way to something more human. South America 2009. Joint Task Force targeting cartel operations with suspected government protection. He spoke carefully, selecting unclassified details. We uncovered evidence that certain U.S. officials were facilitating cartel activities in exchange for substantial compensation. Corrupt government officials working with drug cartels? Sarah clarified, connecting pieces of the puzzle. Among other activities, the operation was officially classified as counter-narcotics, but we discovered connections to weapons trafficking and intelligence trading that compromised multiple agencies. Mike checked the perimeter through a narrow window slit. Santiago. Vargas was a cartel lieutenant who had infiltrated U.S. intelligence operations. During extraction, we recovered documentation implicating several high-level officials. The operation was immediately classified above top secret, all participants reassigned or eliminated. Eliminated? You mean 3 team members died in training accidents within 6 months. 2 more disappeared during subsequent deployments. Carter and I survived by implementing deep cover protocols and maintaining insurance policies against potential cleanup operations. The clinical terminology couldn't disguise the human reality. A black operation gone wrong, lethal consequences, former teammates eliminated to maintain secrecy. The dog tags contained microfilm documenting the connection between Vargas and his government contacts, Mike continued. Names, dates, account transfers, insurance that certain interested parties wouldn't consider us expendable. A subtle sound outside, too deliberate for wildlife, too controlled for casual approach, interrupted their conversation. Mike moved instantly to defensive position, signaling Sarah to take cover. That's Carter's arrival signal, he explained, maintaining tactical readiness nonetheless. But we verify before assuming friendly contact. Through the window, Sarah glimpsed a shadow detaching itself from the forest darkness, moving with the same practiced precision as her father, approaching along the predetermined path. Old ghosts were converging on their hidden sanctuary, carrying secrets from a classified past that had finally caught up with them all. Carter materialized from the darkness like a tactical apparition, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who'd spent decades avoiding detection. He responded correctly to Mike's challenge phrase, approached along the predetermined path, and maintained proper tactical positioning throughout. Sarah watched the reunion from inside the cabin, studying the man who might help explain why her life had been upended. Carter was leaner than she remembered from that brief childhood meeting, tall and wiry with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his skull. His movements mirrored her father's precision, another operator whose civilian disguise had been temporarily set aside. "Perimeter's clean," Carter reported, entering the cabin after Mike's final security verification. "No pursuit, no surveillance. Triple-layered countermeasures confirmed effective." His eyes shifted to Sarah, professional assessment briefly softening. "You've grown up. Last time I saw you, you were beating your dad at poker and complaining." "About math homework? You taught me that card-counting trick," Sarah replied, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. A ghost of a smile touched Carter's face. "Good memory, useful skill." Mike secured the door behind them, implementing additional security measures with practiced efficiency. "What's the operational status?" Carter unpacked his equipment with methodical precision. Communications gear disguised as standard electronics. Compact weaponry concealed in hunting accessories. Documents hidden within innocuous outdoor supplies. "Santiago Vargas is alive," he stated flatly, confirmed through 3 separate intelligence channels. He's been operating under the identity of Gabriel Fuentes for the past decade. Legitimate businessman, philanthropist, potential political aspirant. Mike absorbed this information with the disciplined neutrality of a professional operator, but Sarah caught the momentary tension in his posture, the only tell that the news had impacted him. "That's impossible," Mike said finally. "I put 2 round center mass, confirmed the hit personally." "Body double," Carter replied, spreading surveillance photos across the table. "Facial reconstruction analysis confirms. The real Vargas was extracted by helicopter while we were engaged with his security team." Sarah studied the images. A distinguished-looking man in expensive suits, attending charity galas and business conferences. Nothing about him suggested cartel enforcer or intelligence infiltrator. "He's built a legitimate empire," Carter continued. "Import-export business, technology investments, real estate development. On paper, he's a remarkable success story. Immigrant entrepreneur giving back to the community. In reality, he's leveraging his cartel connections and compromised government contacts into political influence." Mike examined the photos with clinical detachment. Timeline correlation with the break-in at Sarah's home. His security team began mobilizing 3 weeks ago, coinciding with announcement of his exploratory committee for congressional candidacy. Standard background checks would be insufficient given his resources, but deeper vetting might expose inconsistencies in his constructed identity. "So he's eliminating potential evidence before going public," Mike concluded. "Starting with the microfilm and cryptographic keys from Operation Kingsnake." Carter nodded. The intelligence contained in those materials would not only destroy his political aspirations but potentially implicate several current officials who've maintained their positions despite the operation. Sarah followed the conversation with growing comprehension. "So the break-in at my house, the surveillance at the cabin, they're trying to recover evidence that could expose this Vargas person before he runs for office?" "Precisely," Carter confirmed. The dog tags contained microfilm documenting his government connections. The journals contained encrypted keys to electronic records stored on secure servers. Together, they provide irrefutable evidence of his true identity and activities. "But why now?" Sarah pressed. "Dad gave me that box 3 years ago. Why come after it just as this guy is launching a political career?" Mike and Carter exchanged glances, the silent communication of longtime operators. "The timing suggests internal intelligence," Mike said carefully. "Someone within government channels became aware of Vargas's political aspirations and alerted him to potential vulnerability. Someone who knew about Operation Kingsnake and the insurance protocols we established, which means we're potentially facing both cartel resources and government assets," Carter added. "A concerning operational reality." Sarah processed this information, connecting the clinical assessments to her violated home and current fugitive status. "So what exactly was in that box? What did they get from my house?" Mike hesitated, weighing operational security against her. "Need to know." Carter nodded slightly, a silent authorization between former teammates. "The dog tags belonged to Vargas's brother," Mike explained. "Killed during a territorial dispute with a rival cartel. Vargas kept them as a reminder of why. He pursued power. When we recovered them during the operation, we modified the backing to conceal microfilm documenting his government connections, names, dates, account numbers. The journals contained what appeared to be personal notes but were actually encrypted. Access codes to secured servers containing electronic evidence. Carter continued. Audio recordings, financial transfers, surveillance documentation, and now they have both. Sarah concluded grimly. Not necessarily, Mike replied. The materials required specific knowledge to access. The microfilm was designed to self-deteriorate if improperly handled. The encryption keys were meaningless without proper sequence and application protocols. Carter unpacked a secure laptop, establishing satellite connection through equipment disguised as standard hunting gear. We need to determine exactly what they recovered and what they can access with it. That means detailed debrief about the box contents and your interactions with it. Sarah described her limited examination of the box years earlier, looking through medals, briefly examining the dog tags, flipping through journal pages without understanding their significance. I took one photo of the Silver Star to look up what it was awarded for, she added. Just with my phone. It might have captured part of one journal page in the background. Mike and Carter exchanged another glance, professional concern evident. That could be problematic, Carter noted. If the photo was backed up to cloud storage and they accessed your digital accounts, they may have recovered partial encryption data, which could be sufficient to compromise certain security protocols, Mike concluded. The technical assessment continued for several minutes, Carter documenting every detail of Sarah's interaction with the box contents while Mike established perimeter security protocols for their overnight position. Sarah watched them work with newfound understanding. What had once seemed like paranoid hypervigilance now revealed itself as professional expertise honed through classified operations and life-threatening situations. So what happens now? She asked finally. Carter looked up from his documentation. Now we implement appropriate countermeasures. If Vargas is eliminating evidence before his political debut, we need to access the backup protocols and determine our strategic options, including, Mike added quietly, the possibility of direct intervention. The implication hung in the air. Beyond recovery and security lay the potential for offensive operations against the man hunting them, another step deeper into the classified world Sarah had spent years trying to escape, a world that had found her anyway, hidden in a box of military memorabilia in her bedroom closet. Sarah woke to the sound of hushed tactical discussion. Morning light filtered through the cabin's strategically positioned windows as Mike and Carter huddled over maps and surveillance photos, their conversation conducted in the clipped, precise language of operational planning. Secure communication established, Carter was saying. Ramirez confirms backup protocols intact. Alvarez maintaining overwatch on primary subject. Thompson standing by for extraction if necessary. Mike nodded, making notations on what appeared to be a topographical map. Timeline assessment, 48 hours maximum before digital forensics could potentially compromise secondary systems. If they recovered partial encryption from Sarah's cloud storage, they'll have specialists working to access the secured servers. Sarah rose from the military cot, her body stiff from the Spartan sleeping conditions. Both men glanced up, seamlessly, shifting from tactical discussion to general conversation. A security protocol she recognized from childhood when her father's teammates would visit. Coffee's ready, Mike said, gesturing to a camp stove where a battered pot steamed. Limited provisions, but sufficient. The deliberate understatement was pure Mike Reynolds, acknowledging constraints without complaint. Sarah poured herself a cup of surprisingly decent coffee, studying the materials spread across the rough wooden table. What's the plan? She asked directly, sidestepping the usual morning pleasantries. Carter exchanged a glance with Mike, a silent communication regarding how much to share. Mike nodded slightly, authorizing full disclosure. We've established contact with remaining team members from Operation Kingsnake, Carter explained. 3 still active, all implementing security protocols following confirmation of Vargas's survival and current activities. 3 out of how many? Sarah asked. 8 originally, Mike replied, his voice carefully neutral. 3 confirmed deceased in the aftermath. 2 missing, presumed eliminated. The clinical terminology couldn't disguise the human reality. Most of her father's former team dead or disappeared, eliminated to maintain secrecy around an operation that had apparently failed in its primary objective. Vargas has established a surveillance perimeter around your home, Carter continued, sliding a satellite image toward her. Three-man team maintaining rotational observation, identical tactical pattern to the team at my cabin. Professional operators, likely former military working as private contractors. Sarah studied the image, recognizing her neighborhood from the aerial perspective. Small annotations marked observation positions, vehicle placements, patrol patterns. They're waiting for us to return, she concluded. Standard operational procedure, Mike confirmed. Maintain surveillance on known locations while pursuing active leads. They'll have similar coverage on my residents and potentially known associates. What about my job, my friends? Are they at risk? Carter shook his head. Current pattern suggests targeted intelligence gathering rather than expanded threat. They want the remaining evidence, not collateral complications. However, Mike added, we maintain operational assumption of potential escalation if primary objectives remain unfulfilled. The tactical assessment was simultaneously reassuring and disturbing. Her friends likely weren't in danger, but only because the professionals hunting them were focused on specific intelligence objectives rather than lacking capability for broader action. So what happens now? Sarah asked, the question becoming her refrain in this unfamiliar territory. Before either man could answer, a secure satellite phone on the table emitted a single tone. Carter activated it immediately, enabling speaker function while implementing encryption protocols. Confirm secure, he stated. Package delivered, replied a woman's voice, professionally modulated. Response expected within 12 hours. Surveillance indicates increased activity at primary subject's location. Technical teams deployed. They're working against the clock. Acknowledged, Carter responded. Maintain distance. Report any deviation from established pattern. The call ended as abruptly as it had begun. Mike and Carter exchanged significant glances, their expressions revealing concern to Sarah's practiced observation. What package? She asked. What does that mean? We've initiated contact with Vargas, Mike explained, his tone suggesting this was a significant escalation. Indirect communication establishing our knowledge of his survival and possession of secure backup evidence. You're threatening him, Sarah translated. Establishing negotiating parameters, Carter corrected. If he believes all evidence was recovered from your home, he has no incentive to cease pursuit. If he understands backup protocols exist, rational self-interest dictates reassessment, unless he eliminates everyone who knows about the backups, Sarah pointed out. Mike nodded, acknowledging her tactical insight. A calculated risk, but his current positioning as legitimate businessman and political aspirant constrains his more extreme options. Public violence would contradict the identity he's constructed. The communication was deliberately designed to demonstrate our continued operational capability without revealing our location or specific knowledge, Carter added. Professional courtesy between adversaries. Sarah absorbed this information, recognizing the dangerous game unfolding around her. What had begun as a break-in at her home had escalated to covert communication with a cartel operator turned political candidate, with her father and his former teammate implementing classified protocols developed during black operations. What's our next move? She asked, deliberately using the inclusive pronoun. Mike studied her briefly, noting the shift in her language and perspective. Secure this location. Prepare contingency evacuation plans. Monitor response channels for Vargas's reply. And if he decides we're too dangerous to negotiate with, then we implement more direct countermeasures, Carter stated simply. The satellite phone chimed again before Sarah could ask for clarification. Carter activated it with practiced efficiency. Confirmed secure. Primary subject mobile. Reported, the same female voice. Security detail expanded. Technical team recovered from target location with unknown materials. Behavior pattern suggests significant development. Maintain observation, passive only, Carter instructed. Transmit any intelligence through established channels. After the call ended, Mike immediately began gathering their tactical materials. Vargas is moving. That accelerates our timeline. The recovery team at Sarah's house found something, Carter added. Already packing communications equipment. Possibility of compromise elevated. Sarah felt the atmosphere in the cabin shift from strategic planning to imminent action. Both men moved with practiced coordination, implementing what was clearly a pre-established protocol for rapid response to changing tactical conditions. What does this mean? She asked, instinctively beginning to pack her own limited belongings. Mike paused briefly, his expression revealing the gravity of their situation. It means first contact has been established, and Vargas's response suggests escalation rather than negotiation. The implications hung in the air like an unspoken tactical assessment. The game had changed, and not in their favor. They moved like ghosts through the forest, abandoning the cabin using pre-established evacuation protocols. Mike led, maintaining point position and setting their tactical pace. Sarah followed at precisely specified distance, Carter covering their rear approach with practiced vigilance. No verbal communication, only hand signals and predetermined movements. Sarah found herself automatically matching her father's pace and positioning, childhood games resurfacing as survival skills. The weight of her pack, the careful foot placement to minimize sound, the constant environmental scanning, all executed with muscle memory she hadn't realized she'd retained. After 20 minutes of tactical movement, they reached a clearing where a vehicle waited beneath camouflage netting, different from both the truck and Jeep they'd previously used. This one was a nondescript van with commercial markings for a fictional plumbing company. Vehicle rotation protocol, Carter explained quietly as Mike performed security checks. Never use the same transport twice when operational security is compromised. The van's interior had been modified. Reinforced panels, secure communications, equipment disguised as standard work materials, weapons cache concealed within tool storage. Sarah recognized the tactical design beneath civilian appearance, the same principle that had shaped her father's entire life. "Where are we going?" she asked as they pulled onto a rural county road. "Secure rally point," Mike replied, driving. With calculated normalcy, neither too fast nor too slow, maintaining optimal position among sparse traffic. Temporary forward operating base established by Ramirez. "Another team member?" Sarah guessed. Carter nodded. "Demolition specialist during Kingsnake. Now runs a private security firm with specialized military contracts. Maintains independent operational capability outside official channels." The technical terminology translated easily in Sarah's mind. Another former special operator with resources, skills, and motivations similar to her father's. The realization that an entire network of these men existed, living civilian lives, while maintaining clandestine capabilities and connections, shifted her understanding of the world around her. They drove for 90 minutes, implementing counter-surveillance techniques at irregular intervals, sudden turns, brief stops, route adjustments that would reveal potential pursuit. Mike and Carter maintained professional silence, communicating through subtle gestures and predetermined signals. Sarah found herself automatically assisting, watching rear approaches, noting repeated vehicle appearances, maintaining awareness of potential choke points and ambush locations. The designated rally point emerged from rural farmland, a commercial storage facility surrounded by agricultural operations. Deliberately ordinary, strategically positioned for multiple escape routes, visually obscured from major roadways. Mike circled the location twice before approaching, confirming no surveillance or suspicious activity. "Ramirez has prepared a secure unit," Carter explained as they parked behind the main building. "Isolated position, independent power, communications shielded from standard detection methods." Sarah followed their tactical approach to a large storage unit at the facility's rear perimeter. Mike performed the recognition sequence, specific knock pattern followed by verbal authentication code. The heavy door rolled open immediately, revealing a man whose bearing instantly identified him as another operator despite his civilian clothing. "Took you long enough, Reynolds," he greeted Mike with the casual familiarity of warriors who had faced combat together. "I was about to implement secondary protocols, standard counter-surveillance measures," Mike replied, completing visual security checks as they entered. No indication of pursuit or compromise. The storage unit's exterior gave no hint of its interior configuration. A fully equipped tactical operations center disguised within commercial storage, communications equipment, surveillance monitors, weapons cache, and living essentials arranged with military precision. "Alvarez sends regards," Ramirez informed them after securing the door. "She's maintaining surveillance on Vargas from optimal distance. Thompson has established evacuation options if needed." More team members, Sarah realized. More former operators connected through classified history and shared survival objectives. "Sarah Reynolds," Mike introduced her formally. "My daughter," Ramirez nodded respectfully. "Fernando Ramirez. Your father saved my life twice during operations I'm still not allowed to acknowledge." The simple statement carried more weight than elaborate explanations. Sarah recognized the bond between these men. forged through classified combat operations and maintained through years of civilian cover. Operational status, Carter asked, transitioning directly to tactical concerns. Ramirez activated a secure computer system, displaying surveillance footage and intelligence summaries. Vargas has implemented increased security protocols at all known locations, private military contractors, electronic countermeasures, expanded perimeter controls. Our message definitely got his attention. Any indication of his next move? Mike asked, studying the tactical displays. Intelligence suggests he's accelerated his timeline. Public announcement of his exploratory committee moved up to next week. Private meeting with key political supporters scheduled for tomorrow evening. Carter frowned. He's establishing public visibility as protection against covert action. Precisely, Ramirez confirmed. Once he's officially a candidate, any move against him becomes politically complicated. He's using the system as tactical cover. Sarah followed the discussion with growing comprehension, recognizing the strategic implications. Vargas was manipulating legitimate political processes as defense against the very operators who knew his true identity and history. What about the evidence? She asked. The materials from my house and whatever backups you mentioned? The three men exchanged glances. The silent communication of teammates assessing operational security. The microfilm they recovered was designed with degradation failsafes, Mike explained. Improper handling triggers chemical breakdown of key elements. Without specific preservation protocols, critical components would be compromised, and the encryption keys in the journals require precise sequence and application knowledge, Carter added. Without proper implementation, they're meaningless characters, so they don't have what they think they have. Sarah translated. They have fragments, Ramirez clarified. Potentially useful but incomplete, which is why they're still hunting the remaining team members, seeking the complete intelligence package and elimination of remaining witnesses. And the backups? Sarah pressed. Another silent exchange between the operators. Ramirez nodded slightly, apparently authorizing disclosure. Distributed security protocol, Mike explained. Each team member maintains a portion of the complete intelligence package, accessible only through combined authentication. If any one of us is compromised, the remaining members implement contingency procedures to protect the network. The tactical DH implications were clear. Vargas needed to eliminate every surviving team member to completely bury the evidence of his true identity and activities. The accelerated political timeline suggested he was implementing exactly that strategy, establishing public position that would make covert action against him increasingly difficult. So, what's our next move? Sarah asked, deliberately continuing to use the inclusive pronoun. Mike studied her briefly, noting her continued integration into their operational thinking. We implement appropriate countermeasures, beginning with consolidation of surviving intelligence materials and tactical resources, which means, Ramirez added, bringing in the rest of the team. The Tactical Operations Center hummed with controlled activity as additional team members arrived throughout the day. Each followed precise security protocols, counter-surveillance driving, encrypted communication confirmation, specific arrival, sequences designed to detect compromise or coercion. Sarah watched them assemble with growing fascination, these ghosts from her father's classified past materializing into a coordinated unit once more. Alvarez arrived first, a compact woman with watchful eyes who moved with the fluid economy of a lifelong operator. Thompson followed 2 hours later, tall, gray-haired, his civilian appearance belied by the tactical assessment visible in his gaze. They greeted Mike with the casual respect of warriors who had faced combat together, acknowledging Sarah with professional courtesy but clear operational caution. Trust was earned in their world, not automatically extended even to a teammate's daughter. Full team assembly, Carter noted as Thompson completed entry protocols. First time since Bogota. The reference meant nothing to Sarah, but the others exchanged significant glances. Some shared operation that had marked them all. She noticed her father's momentary tension, quickly concealed behind professional composure. Operational assessment, Mike directed, transitioning immediately to tactical matters. Each team member delivered concise intelligence updates, their reporting crisp and precise. Alvarez had maintained surveillance on Vargas, documenting security protocols and movement patterns. Thompson had identified multiple contracted operators functioning as Vargas's expanded security detail, former military with specialized training. Ramirez had established secure communication channels and resource caches throughout the region. The accumulated intelligence painted a concerning picture. Vargas was implementing comprehensive security measures while accelerating his political timeline. His announcement as a congressional candidate would occur in 6 days, preceded by private meetings with influential supporters and potential donors. He's establishing public legitimacy as tactical cover, Alvarez assessed. Once he's an official candidate, any action against him becomes politically sensitive and subject to increased scrutiny. And if elected, he gains additional protection and access. Thompson added grimly. Congressional security, classified briefings, expanded influence networks, which means our operational window is closing rapidly, Carter concluded. We need to implement countermeasures before his public announcement. Sarah followed the discussion with growing comprehension, recognizing the strategic implications. This wasn't just about personal safety or recovery of stolen materials. These operators were assessing potential action against a man positioning himself for significant political power. What exactly are we talking about here? She asked directly. What kind of countermeasures are you considering? The room fell silent, the operators exchanging glances. Mike studied his daughter carefully, weighing operational security against her need to know. Multiple options, he replied finally, ranging from intelligence exposure through appropriate channels to more direct intervention if necessary. The deliberately vague response didn't satisfy Sarah. Are you planning to assassinate a congressional candidate? Because that sounds like domestic terrorism, not countermeasures. Alvarez's expression hardened. Vargas ordered the elimination of 5 team members after Kingsnake. He's responsible for hundreds of deaths through cartel operations. His political aspirations are tactical positioning, not public service. Which doesn't answer my question, Sarah pressed. We're considering all options, Mike stated, his tone ending further discussion, including those within legal and ethical boundaries. The immediate priority is consolidating available intelligence to assess optimal approach. He turned to Carter. Status of the distributed packages? Mine is secure, Carter confirmed. Ramirez and Thompson confirmed theirs during approach. Alvarez's is en route with Martinez. We're only missing yours. All eyes shifted to Mike, who remained tactically neutral despite the implied question. Mine was distributed across multiple secure locations, he explained. Physical components in the box at Sarah's house, which we must assume compromised. Digital components on encrypted drives, access keys separated from content. The military box was only part of your package? Sarah asked, surprised by this revelation. Mike nodded. Insurance against compromise. The physical materials are vulnerable without digital components, and vice versa. So, where's the digital component? Carter asked the question everyone was thinking. Mike turned to Sarah. You still have that old memory drive I gave you for college projects? Sarah stared at him, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized existed. The blue one? With the scratch on the case? Correct. It's in my desk drawer at work. I haven't used it in years. Her expression shifted as understanding dawned. You hid classified intelligence on a drive you gave me for school? Encrypted fragments embedded within corrupted file structures, Mike explained. Undetectable through standard scanning. Accessible only with specific protocols and authentication sequences. Sarah processed this revelation. Another piece of her normal life revealed as tactical deception. So even if they got the microfilm and journals from my house, they have incomplete intelligence, Carter finished. Useful fragments, but insufficient for complete operational understanding, unless they find the memory drive, Thompson noted, which they haven't located yet, or their search patterns would have shifted toward your workplace. Alvarez assessed, but it's only a matter of time before they expand their intelligence gathering to secondary locations. The tactical implications were clear. They needed to recover the memory drive before Vargas's operatives identified its existence and location. Sarah found herself automatically thinking through security protocols at her office building. Access points, surveillance coverage, potential approaches and extraction routes. I can get it, she stated firmly. Mike shook his head immediately. Too risky. Your workplace is likely under surveillance already. Any appearance would trigger immediate response. They're watching for you, Sarah countered. Not me. I can create a plausible reason for a brief office visit. Forgotten item. Paperwork needed for medical leave. Collecting personal belongings during family emergency absence. The operators exchanged tactical assessments through subtle glances. Sarah recognized their silent communication, weighing operational risks against potential intelligence gain. It has tactical validity, Carter acknowledged reluctantly. Civilian approach might avoid triggering immediate response. Standard security personnel would have different protocols than specialized operators. Too many variables, Mike objected. Unknown surveillance positions, undetermined threat response parameters, insufficient extraction options. I know the building layout better than any of you, Sarah argued. Security protocols, staff routines, access points. I can move through that environment naturally in ways none of you can. She met her father's gaze directly. And it's my choice. My life was upended because of that drive. I should be part of recovering it. Mike studied his daughter, recognizing the determined expression he'd seen in the mirror throughout his operational career. The tactical assessment was clear. Her approach had legitimate advantages despite elevated risk factors. Limited exposure protocol, he decided finally. Advanced surveillance, pre-positioned support, immediate extraction upon objective completion. No deviation from established parameters. It wasn't enthusiastic approval, but Sarah recognized it as significant concession from a man who had spent decades controlling operational variables and minimizing unnecessary risks. Understood, she replied, unconsciously adopting the clipped acknowledgement of a team member accepting mission parameters. The transition didn't go unnoticed by the other operators. Thompson raised an eyebrow slightly. Alvarez's assessment became marginally less guarded. Ramirez nodded once in professional respect. They had begun accepting her not just as Mike Reynolds' daughter, but as a potential operational asset with unique capabilities. The memory drive had become her first mission objective. The operational planning proceeded with military precision. Satellite imagery of Sarah's office building displayed on tactical screens as the team established approach vectors, security positions, and extraction routes. Each operator contributed specialized expertise, Ramirez identifying structural vulnerabilities, Alvarez assessing security protocols, Thompson establishing communication parameters, Carter developing technical countermeasures. Mike supervised the planning with the focused intensity Sarah remembered from childhood safety drills, except this was no practice exercise but genuine tactical preparation. Building security consists of standard badge access, lobby personnel, and basic surveillance systems, Sarah explained, indicating entry points on the displayed schematics. No armed guards, no specialized security beyond normal corporate protocols. Access points? Alvarez asked. Main entrance requires visitor check-in. Employee entrance uses badge readers. Emergency exits are alarmed but not actively monitored except through central security system. Estimated time to objective once inside? Thompson inquired. Sarah considered the tactical parameters. 3 minutes from employee entrance to my office. Another minute to locate and secure the memory drive. 2 minutes minimum for extraction through primary route. 6-minute exposure window, Mike calculated. Acceptable for limited infiltration but requires precise timing and coordination. The planning continued throughout the evening. Contingency routes identified, communication protocols established, emergency extraction options prepared. Sarah found herself integrating smoothly into the operational rhythm, her civilian perspective providing valuable insights into the target environment. Recommended approach timing? Mike asked her directly, acknowledging her specialized knowledge of the location. Early morning between 7:30 and 8, Sarah suggested. Security shift change occurs at 7:15. Early arrivals are typically senior managers who use the executive entrance on the opposite side. My department colleagues generally arrive between 8:15 and 9. Mike nodded approval. Operational window confirmed. We'll establish surveillance positions at 0600, confirm security patterns, and initiate approach at 0745, assuming optimal conditions. As the tactical planning reached completion, the operators transitioned to equipment preparation. Communications gear checked and synchronized, weapons inspected and secured, civilian cover established. Sarah watched her father methodically prepare a compact surveillance kit disguised as ordinary personal items. You should rest, he told her, noticing her observation. Tomorrow requires optimal performance. Sarah recognized the advice as both paternal concern and tactical assessment. I will. Just processing everything first. Mike paused his preparations, studying his daughter with an expression that briefly revealed the father beneath the operator. This isn't what I wanted for you, he said quietly, involving you in operational matters. I know, Sarah acknowledged. You spent years trying to keep me away from this world, to protect you from exactly this type of situation. The simple admission carried the weight of their complicated relationship. his hypervigilance and security protocols that had alienated her, his compartmentalized emotions that had created distance, his constant tactical awareness that had disrupted normal family life. "I understand it better now," Sarah admitted. "Not just the training and security measures, but why they were necessary. Why you lived that way." Mike nodded slightly, accepting her acknowledgement without elaboration. Emotional discussions had never been his strength. Another casualty of decades in classified operations where personal feelings created vulnerability. "Get some rest," he repeated, returning to tactical concerns. "We move at 0600. Sarah retreated to the designated rest area, a partitioned section of the storage unit, equipped with basic sleeping accommodations. Sleep proved elusive despite her exhaustion, her mind cycling through tactical considerations and potential scenarios. The operational planning had awakened something she had spent years suppressing. The heightened awareness and strategic thinking her father had instilled through childhood games that now revealed themselves as preparation for genuine threat situations. She must have eventually drifted off, because the next thing she registered was a hand on her shoulder and her father's voice. Calm, focused, operationally precise. 530. Preparation protocol initiated. Sarah came fully awake instantly, another childhood conditioning reasserting itself. She prepared with practiced efficiency, functional clothing, minimal personal items, tactical awareness already engaged before leaving the rest area. The operations center had transformed overnight, the planning materials replaced by active surveillance feeds and communication equipment. Alvarez monitored security frequencies while Carter coordinated tactical positioning with Thompson through encrypted channels. Ramirez prepared extraction vehicles with specialized equipment disguised as commercial materials. Initial surveillance. "Positions established," Mike informed her, checking a secure tablet displaying real-time updates. "Approach routes clear. Standard security protocols observed at target location. Operational parameters appear optimal." Sarah accepted the civilian clothing Alvarez provided, business casual attire appropriate for an office visit, selected to avoid attracting attention while allowing necessary movement. The ensemble included concealed tactical components, communications device disguised as standard earbuds, panic button hidden within a decorative bracelet, tracking element embedded in her watch. "Primary communication protocol," Carter instructed, demonstrating the activation sequence. "Channel remains open continuously. Acknowledge tactical updates with single tap for affirmative, double tap for negative." Sarah practiced the sequence until Carter nodded approval. The professional respect in his assessment was evident. He was treating her as an operational asset rather than a civilian under protection. At precisely 600, they departed the secure facility in separate vehicles. Standard counter-surveillance protocol to minimize detection risk. Sarah rode with Alvarez, who drove with the casual confidence of someone who had conducted countless covert operations in civilian environments. "Your father was the best tactical lead I ever worked with," Alvarez commented as they established position 2 blocks from the target building. "Saved the entire team during Kingsnake when the operation went sideways." Sarah glanced at the woman, surprised by the personal observation amidst operational preparations. "He never talks about his missions. None of us do," Alvarez replied simply. "But you should know, everything he did, all the security measures and hypervigilance you probably resented growing up, it kept him alive through operations that killed operators with less discipline." The simple statement offered a perspective Sarah had rarely considered, that her father's seemingly paranoid behaviors were proven survival mechanisms in environments she couldn't imagine. "Surveillance position established," Mike's voice came through their secure communication channel. "Standard security personnel observed at main entrance. Employee entrance operating on normal protocols. No indication of specialized surveillance or counter-infiltration measures. Thompson in position at extraction point." Came another update. "Primary and secondary routes clear. Support vehicle prepared for immediate departure. Ramirez confirming perimeter security." Added a third voice. "No tactical elements identified in surrounding area. Standard civilian patterns only." The professional coordination was impressive. These operators establishing complete tactical coverage of the target area within minutes, their civilian disguises concealing their military precision. "Initiating approach phase on your confirmation," Mike's voice addressed Sarah directly. She took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the operational plan once more. The memory drive seemed such a small objective for this level of tactical preparation. But she understood its significance now. Not just evidence of Vargas's past, but protection against his future ambitions and potential retribution. "Confirmed," she replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Initiating approach. As Sarah exited the vehicle and walked toward her office building, she felt her father's watchful eyes tracking her movement from his concealed position. The watcher now watched by the very operators he was hunting. Sarah approached her office building with practiced casualness, maintaining the appearance of a regular employee arriving early while mentally executing the tactical plan. Her badge worked normally at the employee entrance. No security lockout. Despite her absence, suggesting her workplace had not yet been compromised. "Access achieved," she murmured into the concealed communication device as she entered the familiar hallway. "Proceeding to objective." "Acknowledged," came her father's measured response. "Maintain awareness of secondary entrance. Security personnel beginning regular patrol cycle." The building felt eerily normal. Fluorescent lights, climate-controlled. Air, generic corporate artwork. But Sarah viewed it through transformed perception. Every security camera represented potential surveillance. Every passing employee might be an embedded observer. Every unexpected sound triggered heightened tactical assessment. She reached her department floor without incident, the early hour ensuring minimal personnel presence. Her office door remained as she had left it days earlier, nameplate intact. Personal items visible through the glass panel. No signs of intrusion or search. Approaching immediate objective, she reported quietly, entering her office and closing the door behind her. Initiating recovery phase, Sarah moved directly to her desk drawer, where the memory drive should have been stored alongside other miscellaneous office supplies. Her hand froze mid-reach as tactical awareness triggered warning signals. Subtle disturbance in the drawer contents. Alignment of items slightly shifted from her habitual organization pattern. Possible compromise, she whispered into the communication device. "Evidence of search activity at target location. Maintain position," Mike's voice responded immediately. "Confirm objective status before proceeding." Sarah carefully examined the drawer contents without disturbing them further. Pens, paper clips, sticky notes, all present but repositioned from their usual places. The memory drive was still there, partially concealed beneath a notepad, but its position had been altered. "Objective located but shows evidence of examination," she reported. Unknown if contents compromised. A brief silence on the communication channel suggested tactical reassessment among the operators. "Secure the objective and initiate immediate extraction," Mike directed finally. "Modified exit protocol through secondary route." Sarah retrieved the memory drive carefully, noting no obvious signs of physical tampering, but unable to determine if the encrypted contents had been accessed or copied. She secured it in her jacket pocket and prepared to exit when a new voice entered her earpiece. Ramirez, his tone reflecting immediate tactical concern. Unknown vehicle approaching employee entrance. Black SUV, tinted windows, tactical positioning. Matches profile of Vargas security detail observed at primary residence. The warning triggered immediate operational shift. Compromise confirmed. Mike assessed instantly. Accelerate extraction. Primary route likely compromised. Shift to contingency. Exit. Sarah's heart rate increased, but her mind remained tactically focused. Another conditioning from childhood emergency drills that had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. She moved to her office door, scanning the department floor for potential threats or obstacles. 2 unknown subjects entering through main lobby, Thompson reported. Professional movement pattern, civilian disguise, potential tactical equipment beneath outerwear. They've identified the objective location, Carter translated. Probable tactical interception team deployed to secure or destroy the evidence. Sarah processed this information while moving toward the emergency stairwell at the department's far end, the designated contingency route established during operational planning. She maintained casual walking pace despite the urgent situation, knowing unusual movement patterns would attract attention from potential observers. Extraction vehicle repositioning to secondary pickup point, Alvarez confirmed. ETA 3 minutes. The tactical updates continued in Sarah's earpiece as she navigated through her workplace, maintaining situational awareness while projecting normal employee behavior. The emergency stairwell door appeared ahead, her extraction route to the building's rear service entrance where Alvarez would be waiting. She had nearly reached it when the elevator at the far end chimed, its doors opening to reveal 2 men in business attire whose bearing instantly registered as professional operators rather than ordinary office workers. Their eyes scanned the environment with tactical assessment, quickly identifying Sarah as she approached the stairwell. "Contact," she whispered urgently. "Two operators. Northwest corner, moving to intercept." "Acknowledged," Mike responded, his voice maintaining professional calm despite the elevated threat to his daughter. "Continue to extraction point. Delaying action initiated." As if synchronized with his words, the building's fire alarm activated, emergency strobes flashing and evacuation tones blaring throughout the floor. The unexpected signal created immediate confusion, employees emerging from offices, security protocols initiating, the approaching operators momentarily hesitating as their tactical environment transformed. "Move now," Mike directed. "Emergency. Protocols provide optimal cover for extraction." Sarah entered the stairwell as office workers began flooding into hallways, the confusion providing temporary concealment from the pursuing operators. She descended rapidly, counting floors as she had practiced during operational planning, maintaining awareness of sounds above that might indicate pursuit. "Subjects diverted by emergency protocols," Thompson reported, attempting to establish secondary intercept position at ground-level exits. "Acknowledged," Mike responded. "Proceed with modified extraction through maintenance access." Sarah reached the designated floor, exiting the stairwell not at ground level where security and the tactical team would be concentrated, but at the basement maintenance level as specified in the contingency plan. She navigated through utility corridors, following the route identified during tactical preparation. 20 seconds to extraction point, she reported, approaching a service door that would lead to the building's rear loading area. "Vehicle in position," Alvarez confirmed. "Area appears clear of hostile elements." Sarah paused at the final door, listening for any indication of threat beyond. Hearing nothing concerning, she pushed through to the exterior loading dock where a maintenance van waited, engine running, Alvarez at the wheel with professional alertness. "Package secured," Sarah confirmed as she entered the vehicle, which immediately accelerated away from the building at deliberate but not suspicious speed. "Diversion successful," came Mike's update through the communication system. "Hostile elements redirected to primary exits. No pursuit identified. Proceed to rendezvous point Alpha for immediate exfiltration." As the extraction vehicle navigated through morning traffic using predetermined routes designed to identify potential surveillance, Sarah examined the memory drive more carefully. The small blue device with its distinctive scratch looked exactly as she remembered. An ordinary storage drive her father had given her years ago for school projects. "How did they know to look for this?" she asked, holding up the drive once they had cleared the immediate danger zone. "They didn't," Alvarez replied, executing a precise driving pattern that would reveal any pursuit. "They were conducting standard intelligence gathering, searching your workspace for potential information sources. The targeted approach team suggests they found something that directed them specifically to your office today. The timing indicates they likely identified the drive's existence through recovered materials from your home," Mike's voice added through the communication channel. "Partial encryption keys in the journals might have contained reference indicators." The tactical assessment continued as they approached the designated rendezvous point, an abandoned warehouse Ramirez had secured through corporate proxies, providing temporary operational security for team reassembly and intelligence analysis. The memory drive weighed practically nothing in Sarah's hand, yet it had triggered a tactical response team, compromised her workplace, and potentially contained information that could destroy a man positioning himself for significant political power. Just another innocuous element of her normal life revealed as tactical deception, part of her father's world that had been hiding in plain sight within her own all along. The team reassembled at the warehouse with tactical precision, each operator arriving via different routes to minimize surveillance risk. Mike conducted immediate debrief, gathering intelligence from all team members while Carter prepared specialized equipment for analyzing the memory drive. "Extraction complete, no pursuit confirmed," Alvarez reported as they secured the perimeter. Sarah performed the operation with professional competence. The simple assessment carried significant weight coming from a veteran operator. Sarah recognized the respect in Alvarez's tone, not offered lightly, especially to a civilian who had only recently entered their tactical world. "The drive shows signs of examination but appears functionally intact," Carter observed, connecting it to a specialized system isolated from external networks. Encryption layers remain active, initiating authentication protocols. As Carter worked, Mike addressed the operational implications. The targeted response to Sarah's office suggests they've connected the drive to the Kingsnake evidence. Their tactical team was prepared for interception rather than standard surveillance, which means Vargas is accelerating his timeline, Thompson added. His announcement is scheduled in 5 days. He needs to eliminate all potential evidence before establishing public position. What's on that drive exactly? Sarah asked, watching Carter implement complex security measures to access its contents. Mike hesitated briefly before deciding transparency was necessary. Operational documentation from Kingsnake, communication records, financial transactions, surveillance materials, all connecting Vargas to his government contacts and cartel operations. Encrypted and fragmented, Carter added, with authentication requirements distributed among team members. Without the proper sequence and verification, the data remains inaccessible. Sarah processed this information as Carter continued his technical work. The innocuous memory drive containing evidence that could destroy a man positioning himself for significant political power, evidence her father had hidden in her ordinary life years ago as insurance against exactly this scenario. Authentication successful, Carter announced after several minutes of complex procedures. Primary encryption layer accessed. Content verification in progress. The team gathered around the secure system as Carter navigated through layers of hidden directories and disguised files. What appeared initially as corrupted academic documents gradually revealed concealed data, surveillance photographs, financial records, transcripts of intercepted communications. Evidence package intact, Carter confirmed. All components preserved despite examination attempts. They didn't break the encryption, Ramirez observed, but they identified the drive's existence through materials recovered from Sarah's home. Mike nodded agreement, which leaves us with a tactical decision regarding optimal application of the recovered intelligence. The statement opened immediate strategic discussion among the operators. Thompson advocated for direct transfer to specific federal authorities with appropriate clearance and jurisdiction. Alvarez suggested targeted intelligence release through secured channels to specific media contacts. Ramirez recommended more direct intervention before Vargas could establish political protection. Sarah listened to these experienced operators debate tactical options, recognizing the complexity of their situation. Each approach carried significant risks and potential consequences, not just for Vargas but for everyone involved in exposing him. What happens to everyone who helped with this? She asked, interrupting the tactical discussion. If this evidence goes public, what happens to all of you, to me? The question shifted the operational focus to personal security implications, something the team had clearly considered but not openly discussed. Exposure would necessitate identity management protocols, Mike acknowledged. Protective measures for all team members, potentially including relocation and cover establishment. In other words, disappearing, Sarah translated, abandoning our current lives. The stark reality hung in the air. These operators had maintained civilian identities for years while preserving tactical capabilities and connections. Exposing Vargas publicly would potentially compromise those carefully constructed lives, forcing them back into the shadows they had partially emerged from. There's another option, Carter suggested after a thoughtful silence. Directed intelligence application, through specialized channels. Specific evidence provided to select individuals within intelligence community. No public exposure, no political fallout, but sufficient leverage to neutralize Vargas's operational capability and political aspirations. A ghost action, Thompson nodded, understanding immediately. Invisible pressure rather than public exposure. It would preserve operational security for team members, Alvarez noted, and potentially avoid retribution against connected individuals. The discussion continued, weighing tactical options against security implications and effectiveness metrics. Throughout, Sarah noticed her father's careful attention to her reactions, gauging her comfort with each potential approach, assessing her integration into their operational thinking. This isn't just your decision, she told him during a brief lull in the tactical planning. This affects all of us now. Mike studied his daughter, noting her deliberate use of inclusive language. You've been drawn into this situation against your will. Your perspective deserves consideration in determining resolution approach. It was as close to an apology as his operational mindset would allow. Acknowledgement that his past had disrupted her carefully constructed normal life, potentially permanently. I think we need to stop him, Sarah stated firmly, but in a way that doesn't destroy everything else in the process, including the lives all of you have built since Kingsnake. The operators exchanged glances, their silent communication revealing surprising alignment with her assessment. Directed application through controlled channels, Mike decided finally. Sufficient pressure to neutralize Vargas while maintaining operational security for all team members. Carter will establish secure communication with appropriate contacts, while Thompson prepares evidence packages for controlled distribution. The decision represented a middle path between public exposure and direct intervention, using the intelligence to eliminate Vargas's threat without creating wider consequences for those involved in exposing him. As the team transitioned to implementation planning, Sarah realized she had just participated in determining how classified intelligence would be used against a man seeking political office, a decision with implications far beyond her previous civilian experience. And strangest of all, it felt like the right decision, not just tactically sound, but ethically balanced, considering all the lives involved, rather than focusing solely on operational objectives. She had entered her father's world more completely than she had ever imagined possible. The implementation proceeded with methodical precision. Carter established secure communication channels with carefully selected contacts in intelligence communities, individuals with appropriate clearance, operational discretion, and professional integrity. Thompson prepared evidence packages with technical precision, ensuring traceability was minimized while credibility remained uncompromised. Ramirez and Alvarez maintained surveillance on Vargas, documenting security protocols and movement patterns to inform operational timing. Mike coordinated these parallel efforts with tactical expertise, every detail considered through the lens of potential consequences and contingencies. Sarah found herself integrated into the planning process, her analytical skills providing valuable perspective on information presentation and civilian impact assessment. Preliminary intelligence delivered to primary contacts, Carter reported on the operation's second day. Initial reception confirms credibility and jurisdiction acceptance. Vargas's security posture has shifted, Alvarez added, returning from surveillance rotation. Expanded protective detail, modified movement patterns, increased counter-surveillance measures. He's sensing pressure. Political announcement preparations continue on schedule, Thompson noted, monitoring media channels and insider communications. Public relations team finalizing materials for campaign launch. The updates painted a clear tactical picture. Their operation was having impact, but Vargas remained committed to his political timeline, calculating that public position would provide protection against the closing net. We need to accelerate pressure application, Mike decided. Directed contact to establish awareness of compromise. The team immediately understood his strategy, moving from background intelligence pressure to direct acknowledgement that Vargas's true identity and history were exposed. The psychological impact of knowing his carefully constructed facade was penetrated would potentially force recalculation of his risk assessment. Secure communication protocol established, Carter confirmed. After implementing complex technical measures, untraceable delivery, verification mechanisms included, the message they crafted was elegantly simple. No threats, no demands, just precise details only someone with intimate knowledge of Kingsnake would possess. Dates, locations, names of specific government contacts, account numbers from financial transactions. Enough to demonstrate complete compromise without revealing their tactical position or intentions. Delivery confirmed, Carter announced the following morning. Package received by Vargas's personal security system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Surveillance feeds showed Vargas's residence erupting into tactical activity. Security teams conducting sweeps, communication specialists implementing countermeasures, vehicles prepared for potential evacuation. He's mobilizing resources, Alvarez assessed, monitoring the response through specialized equipment. Full defensive posture, counterintelligence protocols activated. Scheduled appearances canceled, Thompson added, tracking communications within Vargas's organization. Campaign staff given temporary leave. Public announcement postponed indefinitely due to personal matters requiring immediate attention. The tactical success was evident. Vargas's political timeline disrupted. His careful plans derailed by the sudden exposure of his true identity and history. But experience had taught these operators that cornered adversaries often became more dangerous rather than less. Escalation risk assessment, Mike asked, anticipating potential counterattack. Significant. Ramirez responded honestly. Vargas maintains substantial resources and operational connections. If he identifies our involvement, targeted response is probable, which is why Phase 2 becomes essential, Carter noted. Preparing additional intelligence packages. Distributed responsibility creates strategic protection. The second phase of their operation involved carefully disseminating key evidence to multiple agencies and oversight bodies, creating too many informed parties for Vargas to neutralize, establishing accountability structures that would prevent cover-up or retaliation. Sarah watched the operation unfold with growing appreciation for its ethical precision. They weren't seeking revenge or public destruction of Vargas, merely neutralization of his threat and appropriate accountability for his actions. The surgical approach minimized collateral damage while ensuring he couldn't simply eliminate witnesses and continue his political ascension. He's moving, Alvarez reported suddenly. Surveillance feeds showing increased activity at Vargas's compound. Full security detail, armored vehicles, tactical positioning. Departure appears imminent. Direction? Mike asked immediately. Airport access route, private aviation terminal preparations observed. The tactical implications were clear. Vargas was implementing evacuation rather than confrontation, choosing strategic withdrawal over uncertain conflict. Contingency activated. Came unexpected confirmation through secured channels. Primary subject under observation by federal assets. Travel restrictions implemented through appropriate protocols. Carter smiled slightly at this update. Our intelligence packages reach the right people. They're containing him through official channels. Without public exposure or political theater, Thompson added appreciatively. Clean resolution. The warehouse atmosphere shifted perceptibly as tactical tension began dissipating. Surveillance feeds confirmed Vargas's vehicles being redirected by unmarked federal units, his security detail professionally neutralized without public incident, his person taken into custody through protocols designed for high-value intelligence assets rather than standard criminal suspects. Operation successfully transitioned to authorized channels, Mike assessed, his expression reflecting professional satisfaction rather than personal victory. Our direct involvement no longer required or advisable. The team began systematically dismantling their temporary operations center. Equipment secured, evidence materials properly handled, tactical resources appropriately dispersed. The precision of their shutdown procedures matched the careful planning of their operation. Nothing left to chance or exposure. What happens now? Sarah asked as the warehouse returned to anonymous emptiness. Vargas faces consequences through appropriate channels, Mike explained. His political aspirations eliminated, his operational capabilities neutralized, his government connections exposed to proper authorities. And us? We return to established civilian patterns with appropriate security modifications, Carter replied, maintaining operational awareness but resuming normal activities. The simplicity of this transition, from classified operation back to ordinary life, struck Sarah as both remarkable and slightly unsettling. These operators had moved seamlessly between worlds, addressing a significant national security threat, and then preparing to return to everyday existence as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Just like that, she pressed. Back to normal. After everything that's happened, Mike studied his daughter, recognizing the legitimate question behind her skepticism. Not exactly like before, he acknowledged. Operational awareness remains necessary. Security protocols continue, but yes, return to functional civilian patterns. It was the world he had always inhabited. One foot in classified operations, one in ordinary life. The duality Sarah had resented throughout childhood now revealed as both burden and necessity. Including me? She asked finally. Mike's expression shifted subtly, revealing the father beneath the operator. That's your decision to make. 6 weeks later, Sarah stood in her rebuilt living room, surveying the space with new awareness. Everything appeared normal. Furniture restored to proper positions, electronics replaced, personal items returned to their customary locations, yet nothing felt the same. The renovation company had done excellent work repairing the damage from the burglary. Insurance had covered most costs with minimal complications. Her workplace had accepted her temporary absence with remarkable accommodation. The family emergency explanation generating sympathy rather than suspicion. To outside observers, Sarah Reynolds had simply experienced an unfortunate break-in, taken some personal time to address family matters, and returned to normal life. Only she knew the fundamental shift that had occurred beneath this carefully maintained appearance of ordinary continuity. The doorbell rang. Precise, measured, familiar. She checked the new security camera before opening the door, another habit that had become automatic rather than conscious choice. Right on time, she noted as her father entered, carrying a housewarming gift wrapped with military precision. Traffic patterns were optimal, Mike replied, his casual tone belied by the tactical assessment visible in his scanning gaze, checking sight lines, evaluating security measures, cataloging potential exit routes. Sarah recognized these behaviors without resentment now, understanding them as necessary adaptations rather than paranoid hypervigilance. The same awareness had begun integrating into her own perception. Environmental assessment, tactical positioning, security consciousness, becoming instinctive rather than forced. "How's the new security system?" Mike asked, placing his gift on the coffee table. "Effective without being obvious," she answered, appreciating his restraint in not installing the military-grade options he'd initially suggested. "The supplementary measures are well concealed." The supplementary measures included specialized intrusion detection, passive surveillance capabilities, and reinforced entry points, all disguised within standard home security components, a compromise between tactical necessity and normal appearance that satisfied both their perspectives. "Coffee?" she offered, leading him to the kitchen that now contained concealed panic buttons and emergency communications equipment behind its ordinary appearance. "Thank you." Mike settled at the counter, his position automatically selected for optimal visibility of approaches and exits. "Carter sends regards. He's establishing new operational parameters in the Northwest region." The deliberately vague update conveyed essential information without operational details. Carter relocating temporarily as precautionary measure, despite the successful resolution of the Vargas situation. Standard security protocol following significant operations. "And the others?" Sarah asked, understanding the communication pattern now. "Maintaining established patterns with appropriate modifications," Mike replied, accepting the coffee with a slight nod of thanks. Transition proceeding according to timeline. Translation: the team had returned to their civilian covers while implementing necessary security adjustments. No indication of compromise or blowback from their operation against Vargas. They settled into conversation that balanced normal father-daughter interaction with the tactical reality they now openly shared. Updates on work projects and home improvements interspersed with security assessments and protocol adjustments. The compartmentalization that had once created distance between them now served as common ground, a shared language and understanding that bridged previous divides. "I received an interesting proposition," Sarah mentioned as they moved to the living room. "A consulting firm specializing in data security and threat assessment. They were impressed by my analytical capabilities during a recent project." Mike's expression revealed nothing, but Sarah caught the micro-reaction in his posture, slight tension indicating recognition of potential operational connection. "Thompson's organization," she confirmed, answering his unspoken question. "Apparently, my contribution to the recent situation demonstrated applicable skills." "Professional assessment," Mike acknowledged with subtle approval. "Your analytical capabilities were significant assets during operational planning and execution." The compliment, delivered in his characteristic understated manner, carried more weight than effusive praise might have from someone else. Sarah accepted it with a small nod, matching his communication style. "I'm considering it," she admitted. "Part-time initially, maintaining my current position while exploring the opportunity." Mike studied his daughter carefully. Tactical assessment. Momentarily yielding to paternal concern. It would involve increased operational awareness and potential security considerations. "I'm already living with those," Sarah pointed out, gesturing to the reinforced windows and concealed security measures throughout her home. "The difference would be applying the skills productively rather than just implementing defensive protocols." Her father absorbed this perspective, visibly processing its implications. "A reasonable assessment," he concluded finally. "Thompson maintains excellent operational security and appropriate ethical boundaries." It was as close to explicit approval as his reserved nature allowed. Acknowledgement that the opportunity represented acceptable risk and potential benefit rather than unnecessary danger. "I haven't decided yet," Sarah clarified, "but recent events have changed my perspective on certain capabilities I spent years trying to unlearn." Mike's expression shifted subtly, revealing momentary vulnerability beneath tactical composure. The training was never intended to burden you, only to provide necessary skills for potential scenarios. I know that now, Sarah acknowledged, the admission representing significant evolution in her understanding. What I once resented as paranoia has proven to be legitimate preparation. The conversation paused as they both recognized the weight of this reconciliation, years of tension addressed through shared experience rather than explicit discussion. Mike's protection-focused parenting and Sarah's resistance to his security measures, both validated by recent events. The new normal requires certain adaptations, Mike observed, his gaze taking in the rebuilt living room with its carefully concealed security features. But adaptation doesn't preclude functional civilian life. It was the balance he had maintained for decades, operational awareness coexisting with ordinary existence. The duality Sarah had once rejected now made sense as necessary. Integration rather than paranoid division. I'm still processing everything, she admitted. Understanding that your world and mine were never actually separate, just viewed from different perspectives. Mike nodded once, accepting this assessment without need for elaboration. They had moved beyond requiring explicit discussion of emotional matters, finding connection through shared understanding instead. As evening approached, Mike prepared to depart, implementing standard protocols disguised as ordinary leave-taking. Sarah walked him to the door, their farewell carrying the unspoken acknowledgement that both would maintain appropriate security measures in the days ahead. Weekly check-in remains appropriate, Mike suggested, his tone carefully balanced between tactical procedure and paternal contact. Sunday evenings, Sarah agreed, alternating locations with standard verification. The simple exchange represented their new relationship, security protocols integrated with family connection, tactical awareness coexisting with emotional bonds. The boundaries between his classified world and her civilian one had dissolved, replaced by shared understanding of necessary balance. After her father departed, Sarah secured her home with practiced efficiency, checking locks, activating systems, verifying perimeter integrity. The procedures no longer felt like paranoid excess but reasonable precaution, not fearful hypervigilance but practical awareness. The memory of finding her door ajar that fateful day remained vivid. The moment her carefully constructed normal life had revealed itself as vulnerable illusion. Yet from that violation had emerged new understanding, not just of external threats, but of her father's lifetime of protective vigilance. Sarah Reynolds surveyed her secured home, recognizing it as both ordinary residence and defensive position, both civilian space and tactical environment. The duality no longer seemed contradictory but complementary, different aspects of a complex reality she now perceived more completely. Her father had been right all along, and that acknowledgement brought not resentment but appreciation for the preparation that had ultimately protected them both.